We're here, folks. We are here. The news on this Monday. Iowa football announcing through interim AD Beth Getz that Iowa football offensive coordinator will not be retained following the 2023 season. That is official from Iowa AD Beth Getz. I just got back to my home base. I knew, so a lot of people knew this was coming. Early this morning, started to have a couple people reach out to me, one of which is going to be joining us later in the show. Regarding this news, it was out there for a while, and I told a couple people that I knew, hey, you better brace yourselves. And I think a lot of people heard that same message throughout the Twitter waves and the Twitter sphere. It's amazing how news spreads like wildfire, and it was certainly, I don't think, Iowa's intention for this news to get broken before 2:30 p.m. Central Time, but nonetheless, that did not interfere with Beth Getz's decision. And was it ultimately her decision? We'll talk about that. All right, I've got some thoughts on that and provide a little bit of insight onto what I've heard as far as how this all went down, and hopefully we'll get some insight from Hawkeye Report. Hawkeye Report's own Tom Kakert, who will be joining us here, we expect, in a little bit. I know he is en route to a safe place as well. This is a purely, I shouldn't say an instant reaction, because, again, I first caught wind of this morning like a lot of people did and was told, hey, this is going to be coming out at 2:30. It certainly did. And I haven't really had a chance. I've been on the go all day. Haven't really had a chance to think about this deeply. Did I expect this? Absolutely not. Not at this point in the season. Not the way this went down. Obviously, this brings to the surface a number of supplementary questions. One being the future of head coach Kirk FERENTZ. Do we just move on with this news that Brian Ferentz will not be returning following the 2023 season? Does Iowa just move on? Does Kirk just move on to another person at the helm? Will that person be John Budmeyer? That's long been the expectation since Iowa hired John Budmeyer on, that if something were to happen, if Brian Ferentz were to move on or were to be forced out, which was not something I expected. I did not expect Iowa ultimately to force Brian Ferentz out, or at least for the news to come down the way it did. Of course, it did happen that way. But we have long expected John Budmeyer to be the heir apparent. That's not something that I have vouched for. I don't think a lot of people on the outside have looked at John Budmeyer's resume and said, wow, this guy is primed to be the next Iowa OC. However, with that being said, that has been the expectation among the people that have been connected to this situation even better than I have been. And so, again, we're going to be here at least for the next hour and a half talking about this news, folks. So before we get started, and keep in mind, I appreciate everybody being here. We got about 260 people on the live stream. We are streaming to one channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm right now on this Monday. This is going to be a very busy day. Let me run through the schedule real quick. And I had not posted this, had not gotten a chance to kind of give everybody an idea of where the schedule is for the day of programming. Again, I'll be going for the next hour and a half here on the show. At 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time, we've got a basketball game. We've got the first men's basketball game of the season. It's the exhibition inside Carver against Quincy. We're doing a brief post-game show at 9 p.m. Central Time following that game. And then at 9:30 p.m., folks, write this down, Coach Don Patterson will be joining me live. I want to make everybody aware of this. That was a previously scheduled show. All right, Coach Patterson had agreed to do that show prior to this news breaking. That schedule, that plan has not changed. Coach Patterson will be with me at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. So a full evening of Hawkeye talk, Hawkeye sports, and you, the caller, the chatter, and we're going to, again, continue to take your calls throughout the rest of the evening. Please take a moment, because I did just throw the stream together last minute. I knew there was really no choice. I had no choice in this. We had to go live. And there was no way for me to get live before now. So appreciate everybody being patient over the last hour since this news officially broke from Iowa. Please take a moment to share this stream out on social media, because we're going to be talking so many different subjects relative to this news over the next hour and a half. But please share this show out on social media. if you're interested in sponsoring the show, you can certainly reach out to me. It's a little late for today's show, but reach out to me because that's always a great way to grow your business and expand your reach. But in the meantime, please share the show out on social media, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you social media. All right, folks, let's go to our first caller of the day. One of our loyal listeners is with us. James is with us. James, welcome to the show.
How you doing? It's been a while on my side of things. It's been like 2 weeks, so it's kind of weird again to be back. But I've been following, obviously, as you know, I've been liking the videos and watching them all. So I'm still here. I just been busy. But anyways, my first thought was it feels good, but you also don't know what's gonna come next. What I mean by that is like, is Kirk gonna go? $40 million is a lot of money. You know what I mean? So you don't know what the plan's going to be in that retrospective if he's going to go or not. But it does feel good to at least have an AD that at least did something that needed to be done, if that makes sense.
I'm sure a lot of fans feel vindicated right now, James. I'm sure a lot of fans feel absolutely vindicated. They feel like this was long overdue, but they feel like finally they've got somebody representing the people, so to speak, the Hawkeye fans at large, um, across the country. And I think that's fair. Now, how much pressure was behind Beth Getz from the people above her? You know, based on what I was told a little bit ago, maybe there was some pressure above Beth. I mean, keep in mind, she is just the interim AD. I think that's why this surprised me the most, is to see her make such a big decision that involves power and involves 24 years, Kirk Ferentz at the helm, and kind of pushing back against that power and that headship of this program. So that makes me think maybe there was some push from above Beth Getz's pay grade. That's possible, but you're right. There's reason to have a lot of confidence and just positivity about a move that should have been made a long time ago.
But like I was also saying too, you have positivity, but you also don't know what I'm saying. Come of it in the fact of you don't know if Kirk's gonna leave. And I know some people's envision is, oh, it's just this offense because of Kirk. Like Brian has something to do with it too, but it's also this way because of Kirk. Like the offense also looks this way because of Kirk as well.
James,
So I know that's coming from both
a couple
sides.
weeks ago, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago on a post game show, somebody called in and asked the question, Corey, is this, and asked me and Coach Patterson, is this offense any different as long as Kirk is here? I mean, if Brian leaves or he's pushed out, does this offense change? And my short answer was, I think it will largely be the same. But just like when you upgrade a quarterback, right, with Cade McNamara, assuming were going to get a healthy Cade McNamara, little did we know he was going to get hurt again and eventually tear his knee and be out for the year. But that was an upgrade. So what does that look like statistically? You know, how much do you see a difference? Well, it obviously depends on who Iowa hires, who Iowa brings in. Do they just promote John Budmeyer from within? I think that's probably what happens based on the scuttlebutt that's been out there to this point. But certainly the room for improvement, it all depends on how much is Kirk willing to allow the offense to change and evolve in his final years as the Hawkeye head man. This will probably be the final OC that he hires, assuming he stays, right? Assuming he returns for 2024. And James, you know, I've questioned whether that will happen even before this news came down. I've questioned whether or not that will happen. So now certainly that begs the question, will Kirk come back? And if he does come back, what's the ceiling on the offense? It just depends on how he approaches this. Up until this point, Kirk has not shown me any reason. He's not proven to me that he has any desire, any strong desire to improve this offense. This appears to have been a decision from the Iowa administration, not from Kirk Ferentz. He has doubled down not only on Brian, but on how this offense operates schematically, personnel wise, etc., for years now. So that makes me think whoever he brings in, if it's his choice, which you would think it would be, it's going to be somebody that fits within the confines of what he wants, and that limits the ceiling, the rise that this offense can take. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I've seen some people talking about like the timing of it is bad because we still have like 4 weeks left in the regular season, obviously a bowl game. But I feel like you also don't want it to hold over the head. You know what I mean? Like in the fact that he already knows it's gonna happen. Like if Brian already knows it's gonna happen, he's still gonna be coaching with that whether the public knows or not. You know what I'm saying? Like you get
Well,
what I mean?
wait. Hold on a second. Why is it bad timing?
I don't know, because people are like,
Was
you
this
should have
four
just
games
waited
left?
till the end of the year. They're like, you should just wait till the end of the year because it's bad look on the players. And I was like, why would you wait till the end of the year in retrospect of he already knows it's coming? So like,
This should have been done last year.
yeah, I agree with you. I'm
That's
not
the whole
disagreeing with
point.
you at all. I'm
You
not
you
disagreeing
could
with you.
argue it should have been done the year before that, but it most definitely should
Yeah,
have been done last year. There was talk during last season of it being done mid-season. And look, I made the comment during last season. I remember, I think it was after that game against Illinois. I made the comment that, hey, you ought to be thinking they're not going to do it, but I thought you ought to be thinking about a change mid-season. Why? Well, there's several reasons. A, we don't know what's going to happen in these last 4 games, James. But I don't
yeah.
think like what's the downside of let me not use a Brian Ferentz ism of what's the upside. Let me reverse that. What's the downside of making that move right now? What's the
Downside,
downside?
I don't think there's much, but I also
No,
agree.
hold on. What's the argument though, James? What would be the argument? What would be the argument against making a change like this midseason? What's the downfall of doing this?
I don't think there really is one in retrospect. It's going to be the same thing anyways. So you're just throwing the same thing out there.
They are the worst offense in the country.
Right.
They are the worst
You
offense
can't
in the
get worse. You can't go down any farther. So
you literally it's almost impossible. We've been saying this for like 2 or 3 years. You literally cannot get worse than worse.
yeah,
Right? You can't get worse than worse. So I don't know what the downside of making this, if anything, maybe it keeps some guys that were weighing the portal to this point. Like we don't know what's going to happen with Seth Anderson. We don't know what's going to happen with Caleb Brown. There were rumors about Caleb Brown a few weeks ago. He has since disappeared. Maybe whoever takes over, whether it's, first of all, we know Brian is going to stay. According to the release today, Brian is going to stay through the rest of the season. But at least that knowledge of knowing, hey, they're going to bring in someone different, even if it is a John Budmeyer. It's not going to be Brian Ferentz running the show. That might that set a fire under somebody to reconsider the transfer portal. That's something they got to think about because the transfer portal window opens I think the Monday after the last game of the
yeah,
season.
right away, pretty much. But one thing I think is weird too is Cade just announced he's coming back for 2024 like a week ago, and then this happens. So I was kind of think that's a little weird, but I'm happy for him, and hopefully he can get healthy again. But like I agree with you. I don't think it's that big of a issue if you would have fired him now. In retrospect, of you can't get any worse. And if you do promote Budmeyer to offensive coordinator, maybe he can get maybe something different. Like not something different, but like maybe run a little bit of like his play call might be a little different. You know what I mean? Like not saying it's the
Well,
same thing every time. Or as like specific because like you knew what Brian was going to do for a while there. There was points where they said you run, pass, run, pass. So you know what I mean? Like he was so predictable for a while. I know. I think that was it was either Caker or Doctorman. Like wrote a report on him about being.
well, I'll say this, and like I said, we expect to be joined by Tom Kakert here in a little bit, and he can provide some more insight on this. But the only reason I would say I'm surprised by how this all went down this week is that it is odd timing from Iowa's perspective. Because if you're going to make a change mid-season, I would almost think it'd be better to just cut ties now. Why lead this guy through the rest of the year? And, if you're looking at what Wisconsin did, maybe you agree or disagree with what Wisconsin did, but what did they do? They got rid of Paul Chryst. Of course, he was a head coach. Got rid of Paul Chryst and then used the rest of the season to audition Jim Leonhard. So would it have almost made sense for Iowa to get rid of Brian, cut ties right now, and simply audition John Budmeyer as the OC for the final 4 games of the season? Couldn't that have been done?
I like the way I like the way that sounds in no retrospect of like you at least know. Obviously, it's 4 weeks of maybe the team doesn't look the same in retrospect of like you're gonna have Cade next year, hopefully a healthy Cade, right? But like it's
Yeah,
still something you still get a look of.
you're exactly. You're going to get a look at what a John Budmeyer coached offense would potentially look like. And look, I mean, for the people that say, well, if it's Budmeyer, it's going to be the same. Well, Iowa's had Ken O'Keefe as their offensive coordinator. They've had Greg Davis as their offensive coordinator, and now they've had Brian Ferentz as their OC, all under Kirk Ferentz. All those offenses looked very similar, but numbers-wise, production-wise, all were different. You look at Brian Ferentz's last 4 years of his, well, going back at least the last 3 years, we've never seen production as bad, as poor as we've seen in 21, 22, 23. Say what you want about Greg Davis, say what you want about Ken O'Keefe. Those guys at least produced offenses that were below average, but we're not horrific. We've never seen horrific offenses like we've seen under Brian Ferentz. So, with the exception maybe being 99 and the first year or two of Kirk Ferentz's tenure. So I just think that even if the offense looks the same, this is the right decision. This is the step in the right direction. Whether or not this just overhauls the offense and the offense becomes great, I don't think that's going to happen based on this one move. Obviously, who they bring in is going to be a major storyline, but this had to be done. I mean, there was no future moving forward with Brian Ferentz at the helm. There just wasn't.
But it's also like you said, I agree with you. Like you said, it's the same thing. It's Greg Davis offense definitely look different than this offense. You know what I mean? Where it's like even though they're the same players, like not the same players, but like the same style. Like Kirk wants to run the same style. It still look different from coach to coach. So like you don't know what Bud Myers could look like in a different realm if he is the guy or whatever. It could look like in a different realm.
Well, let's not forget this. Let's not forget that John Budmeyer was the OC 1 year at Colorado State. He's been an offensive coordinator 1 year, and Colorado State was terrible. So,
Yeah.
again, resume-wise, he's got a history with Cade. He's got a history with Deacon Hill. But other than that, he's got 1 year experience play calling, and it wasn't necessarily what I would call good experience on paper. So obviously my advice would be, and nobody cares what I have to say, but my advice to Kirk and to the administration would be make a search, make an actual search for your next OC. And I don't know whether they'll do that. I know they didn't do it the last time they had an opportunity to hire a coach. And I'm talking about quarterbacks coach. That decision was made to promote Brian from within, and they did not entertain any outside possibilities. So I hope that's not the case here. And perhaps the change with the athletic director, certainly that has a play in what happened today. Hopefully that will also have an impact on who the next offensive coordinator is. But again, until Kirk is gone, I would not expect him to change his overarching philosophy as it relates to football and offense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And it'll be interesting to see one more question that I get off and let somebody else talk. But do you think, and obviously you said you do think, now that it's official though, you think Kirk's done? Like now it's official that Brian's not coming back next year, you think Kirk is done? Or you think that $40 million is a lot of money? That's the only thing that I'm kind of like, I don't know, because 40 mil is a lot of money.
Yeah, I've never guaranteed that he'd be gone this year, even if Brian did leave, but I think it's still a very strong possibility. I would say this probably moves me in that direction a little bit further, but I would also not be shocked if he comes back because, like you said, that's a lot of money to walk away from. And frankly, nobody has told me, nobody that I trust has given me any indication that Kirk has given any indication that he might be done after this year. It's just a feeling, and with the circumstances with the conference and with Brian and with the portal and all this stuff, to me, all the stars kind of align for that. So I won't be shocked either way, but I certainly won't be shocked if he walks away.
For sure, and it'll be interesting to see. And obviously, I know it's a exhibition game tonight, but it'll be interesting to see what the men's basketball team looks like. And I know you're in for a long day, so I'll let you get to the next caller. And I appreciate you getting on. I knew you probably would, but I appreciate you getting on. I know you had probably a busy day, but at
I
least you made
appreciate
it for us. So.
Thank you for being here, sir. All right. Again, just starting fresh here. And as I'm talking to everybody, I'm going to continue to try to share this post out on social media, this stream. Please take a moment to do that. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button. Please hit the thumbs up button. Be sure you're subscribed if you're here. And please share the show out wherever you have a social media base, even if it's just by email or text, word of mouth to fellow Hawkeye friends and family alike. Let's go to our phone line. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Let's go to our hello.
Hello, you're on the air.
This is Randy Hanson.
Hey, Randy.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Randy, loud and clear.
Okay. Hey, got a couple of questions on this. I'm watch your show all the time. I've been on here a couple of times down here in Tyler, Texas. And this is kind of the go-to site, if you want the real deal Hawkeye news. So I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you for that.
Let me ask you though, this has so many different angles to it. I'm one of these guys, when Hayden Fry came in, how just awesome it was when he turned that program around. And Then, Kirk FERENTZ steps in. I mean, there's just been so many unbelievably great moments under Kirk FERENTZ. And I'm just so grateful, to watch to be a Hawkeye. I mean, it's just great that that's your team. Now, I think Brian FERENTZ should have resigned on his own volition last year, just to spare everybody all this. But I just have a hard time. I really have a hard time with the timing of this. Did he need to go? Yes. But if it was going to happen anyways, why not just wait, till the end of the season, try to make it somewhat of a graceful exit, let him resign, whatever.
Well, a couple things. Let me just interrupt real quick, and then you can comment off what I have to say here. So, based on what I was told earlier today, Brian FERENTZ was given the opportunity to resign and chose not to. That's part A. Now, as far as timing is concerned, I understand where you're coming from with timing. But I will say this. Is there a possibility? I don't know. This is just me speculating. This part is just pure speculation. But is there a chance that Beth and maybe people above Beth that did not agree with the contract stipulation of the 25 point per game thing and the 7-win thing that Gary Barta agreed to with obviously Brian FERENTZ and Kirk and FERENTZ involved? Is there a possibility that Beth and company did not want that contract stipulation, which has been kind of disgraceful to the university and created even more of a laughing stock for Iowa? Is it possible that they did not want that to be the narrative at the end of the year, that Brian was simply leaving because he didn't achieve his mark? Is it possible that Beth and this administration wanted everybody to know this has nothing to do with 25 points per game? The performance isn't good enough. This is not how we judge our coaching staff, our employees. Is that possible?
Well, I'm sure it's possible. I don't know all the politics and stuff that go on. I just know this: if I'm the AD or assistant AD, I'm looking at Kirk FERENTZ's totality of work, what he's done to the program. Waving to the hospital at the second quarter. I mean, this guy's just unbelievably great for Iowa. Whether people are upset with him or what, I'm not one of them. I'm strongly in his corner. And I would like for him to not resign. I would like for him to go on and retire there. I mean, he never used Iowa as a stepping stone to a better place. He's been loyal to Iowa. I love the guy. But I definitely thought he had a blind spot with a nepotism. I just could never get past that, to be honest. But still, what he's done. And so I would want, if I'm the AD, if I'm the higher ups, I would want to do everything that I could to make sure he stays. Now, was he given that chance to resign and resign immediately? Or could he have resigned quietly at the end of the year and he just refused to do that? I don't know that. I just know that I would have tried to make it less of a hard, if I'm Kirk FERENTZ, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, these guys are going to be sticking their nose in our business, whether they are or aren't. I just think, you look at, I'm down here around the SEC and I watch these coaches every 2 or 3 years, they're putting a new coach in here. Doesn't work. I mean, you just got a great system up there. That defense is just awesome to watch.
Yeah.
I just personally, I would like to do anything I could to make sure Kirk stays. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. My only argument the other way, sir, would be he has been here 24 years. He's built great immunity, as you talked about. But he has been given time to remedy this situation. This offense has been the laughingstock in college football for 3 straight years. He has been given ample time. It's an embarrassment. Yeah, it is. Kirk has been given ample time to do something, whether it mean move Brian to a different spot, help Brian find another job, do something else, or move him, take him away from being play caller, whatever. He's chosen to double down over and over and over and over and over again. So do you just give him unlimited power because of what Kirk has given this program? I don't think you do. And if Kirk and Brian both dug their heels in and said, we are not voluntarily doing anything different here, Brian's not leaving, and Kirk says, hey, I'm leaving. If Brian leaves or if he's forced out, I've made my stance clear. I love Kirk just like you do, but all good things come to an end at some point. If Kirk's going to hold the program hostage, then I would say do what you got to do, Kirk, but we have to move on. There has to be oversight.
Well, I totally agree with that. Now, we don't know everything that went on behind the scenes, so there's no way we would know that. But, and I'm definitely not about the tail wagging the dog. I just wished all this would have happened at the end of the season. Now, that said, let's just say Kirk moves on. Where are we going to go? Where's the Hawkeyes going to go? I mean,
yeah, we don't know, but I do think there are. If Kirk moves on, that doesn't mean Iowa's destined to become Nebraska. And I do think I think fans, we have been sold a narrative about this program for years that is simply not true. I think we've been sold the narrative that Iowa's not that attractive of a program, that you can't recruit to Iowa. I don't buy that for a second. And, maybe Kirk moves on. Is it possible that Kirk moves on after this season and the next hire is a flop? Sure, it is. It's absolutely a possibility that happens. And there are some people that feel very strongly about not wanting to even take that risk, go down that road and take that risk. And I respect people who feel that way. I disagree. To me, it's worth taking the risk. And we also don't know if Kirk moves on. Does that mean Phil will move on? Does that mean LeVar will move on? Would Iowa be able to make a push for a Chris Kleiman or even one of the Stoops brothers? I don't know. Those are all unanswered questions. But to me, telling Kirk that, hey, this is not working. We've given you 3 years to fix the problem. You're refusing to fix the problem. It's just like a CEO, or even you want to call it, let's go on a smaller scale, an owner of a restaurant comes in to check in on the restaurant and finds that a couple of the employees are doing an awful job. And he tells the GM, you have to do something about this. And the GM says, no. Well, I mean, you can't just say, okay, well, you're the GM, even though I'm above you. You're allowed to do what you want. At some point, there has to be even oversight over Kirk. I don't think we should treat Kirk like the king of Iowa football, right? There's got to be oversight in all this.
I definitely agree with that. I just think, the one thing that I've loved about the whole Iowa program is when we get a coach, they stick, they stay. Women's basketball, men's basketball. But you're not, I don't want to say you just keep somebody for the sake of keeping them. But the one thing for sure is, like Texas A&M, that's your own deal. When you go to A&M, you're a Aggie for life. I mean, I don't want to say cult, but I mean, man, they've got their way of it. And when you're in, you're in. Iowa's kind of the same way. I've watched some of those Marv Cook, or that guy, the tight end, that caught that last second pass against Ohio State that year, last play of the game to win it a few years back. There's just the Iowa Hawkeye way, and I just kind of hate to see that go away. Now, let's say Kirk's not going to move on and go build another program at that age.
No.
I mean, he's retired. He's done. But I do think, if Iowa's not just your normal place, where you're going to come in, and this is, we're going to stay here for 2 or 3 years. Iowa's kind of a special place. It really is. My son was born and raised down here in Tyler, and, he's 14 years old. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to be good enough to play in college ball, but if he ever had a chance to play for the Hawkeyes, that's his team. He loves Iowa, lives and dies. I'm just saying, Iowa's a special place.
Agree.
It's not a Nebraska. It's not an Indiana. It's Iowa. And so, who's going to come in and replace? I hope they would really look for that guy that's going to come in for the long haul. Now, that said, if Kirk left, would the defensive coordinator, Parker, would he even be under consideration? And in your opinion, is he a head coach material guy?
I mean, yeah, I think this conversation becomes more and more relevant as we get closer to the end of the season because of what you've outlined, the risk that was taken today with this announcement, the risk that potentially Kirk decides to move on because his son was forced out. And if Kirk does that again, Kirk does that. And I think that conversation of who's the next head coach, who should Iowa pursue becomes much more relevant. I've made several comments in the past, and I don't really care what people laugh about it or not. I think Phil Parker and Bob Stoops would be my first two calls, and I would say to Bob, hey, or actually, you know what? Frankly, I'd say to Phil first. I'd say, Phil, are you interested in being a head coach? We know what you've said in the past. I do not need fans reaching out to me saying, Corey, you don't know what you're talking about. Phil doesn't want to be a head coach. Okay, look, you still got to ask. You still approach him. The guy is the most deserving coordinator in college football. So you at least approach that subject with Phil Parker. If he says no, then I would proceed to ask him, what would it take to get you to stay on as the coordinator for as long as you have left in the tank without Kirk? Of course, if Kirk leaves, that's his decision. And so if you could get Phil, if Phil says, no, I don't want the head coaching job, but I would be interested in staying as the DC, then I would start interviewing candidates for the head coaching spot and letting every candidate know, look, this defense is Phil Parker's defense, and that's not changing as long as he wants to stay here. It is not changing. And that's how I would approach it. And I would approach it very similarly with LeVar Woods. Now, I don't think you just hand the keys to the Lamborghini to LeVar Woods. He does not have the resume that Phil Parker does, but he does have an exceptional special teams coaching resume, and you want to keep him on. But I don't know what his future entails. So Bob Stoops and Phil Parker would be my first two calls. And then as far as head coaching after that, yeah, Mark Stoops would be on the list. We'll see what Brett ends up doing over at Illinois this year. He's been sort of high on my list, but they've had a down year. There's a number of people that you could call, and I don't think Iowa is as ugly of a job as some people want to make it out to be.
I think Iowa's just. I'm just a fan, of course, but I think there's just something special about Iowa. See, I grew up in Iowa. I don't think I think you can recruit there. I think part of the reason the offense, you've been having trouble getting offensive players in there is they know FERENTZ is going to be the offensive coordinator. What receiver is going to want to come there?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a hard sell, when that guy, and you're the coach's son, so he's not going anywhere. So I get that. But you offer that job to Mike Stoops, Bob Stoops, or Norm Parker, and I think, or Phil Parker, I think 100% they're jumping on that job. That's, to me, one of the cream of the crop jobs in Iowa or in the country.
Well, and just think about this for a second. People want to say it's a fantasy. They can say that if they want. Imagine if Kirk walks away, and I hope he doesn't. I'm with you. I hope he doesn't. But if Kirk decides to walk away and somehow you can convince Phil Parker to stay on as a head coach, and you somehow convince LeVar Woods to stay on as special teams coordinator, picture Phil as the head coach, LeVar as special teams coordinator. Phil probably promotes Seth Wallace, who's been a part of that staff for years now, promotes him as the DC, and then bring in an offensive-minded guy. This is one of the stronger programs in the country. I mean, it can be. That's the potential of what Phil has built with this defense, what Kirk and Phil have built with this defense, special teams units. They're an offense away from competing nationally, and that's what's been the frustration from people across the country for so long, and that's not necessarily gone by the wayside, but the right decisions, the right moves have to be made from here on out.
I agree, and those are great points, and that would be my first choice, Parker, if Kirk were to go. I kind of agree with your previous caller. $40 billion, man, that's a lot of money to walk away from. So I kind of lean that he would stay, but I think there's a good possibility, just like you said, he might not, and just the money might not be that big a deal for him.
Yeah, he's made plenty of it.
So my next question would just be real quick: who do you think is going to be in the running for the AD position? Because that's going to be a big thing.
It ought to be Beth Getz, based on what we've seen so far. Her connection, what she's proven so far in a few months on the job, not just with this Brian Ferentz decision, because like I said, I think there was probably some pressure above her to make this move, but ultimately she called the shot. Just her interaction and her engagement with all the programs and her desire to endorse the Swarm, the collective, NIL, all that. I think she's an easy candidate. Now, I'm all for interviewing the best people available for the job, but I would be shocked at this point if she's not retained as the AD. I'd almost be even more shocked now than I would have been yesterday, because now she's been given the authority to make a move like this. I think she's the shoe-in for the next AD. I can't imagine them going anywhere else.
Well, I hope so, because now, and you brought that up. That I'll let you make my last part of it. But you had a guy on there. I can't remember what his name was, but he just thought, that does a lot of work with the NIL. I think he lives down in Florida.
Yeah,
he's been on your.
Yeah, you're talking about Brad Heinrichs. He's the CEO of the Swarm Collective.
Right. Okay, so do you think if she takes the AD, she's going to embrace him wholeheartedly? Because I think that dude is right on the. I mean, he's hitting the nail on the head. What was missing and what needs to happen in order for us to stay competitive. Does she embrace him and the NIL and all that?
Yeah, she's already embraced him. The communication between those two has been extremely strong since August, and I think what Gary Barta was doing as far as his lack of involvement with NIL wasn't just his lack of oversight with this situation with Brian, but his lack of involvement and endorsement for the Swarm Collective was just so egregious. And that's such a big part of recruiting, as you well know, down in Texas. That's such a NIL is such a big part of recruiting now, that you have to have an AD that's on board with the powers that be behind NIL. And Beth has proven that she is behind that. I'd love to have Beth on this show at some point. I hope we can make that happen. But like I said, I would just be shocked at this point if they move in any direction other than Beth gets.
Yeah, well, that's reassuring to hear, because that guy that does the Swarm, I mean, man, he is right on target. And I'm just glad he's a part of the deal with Iowa.
Yep.
And stuff. So anyways, well, that's all I got, but I appreciate the show, and I'll keep watching.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call. Yeah, good stuff. And those are all good questions. As of right now, again, I'd be shocked if they go with anybody other than Beth. I've heard a lot of people in the chat. Does this mean Kirk's moving on? We don't know. But I've been talking about that for a couple of months, how I think the stars have aligned for that to be a possibility. Leo, super chat. Thank you, Leo. He says, come on, Coach Patterson. Thank you, Leo. And Zach with the super chat as well. Appreciate you being here, Zach. And I believe, was there a comment to go along with this? Sometimes I can go back and find the comment that people meant to add on to that. Let's see. Zach. I apologize, Zach, if well, he says nothing will change, LOL. Was that the comment? Okay. And the voice of college football, how about Mark Rogers here? Hi, everyone. I don't like to see anyone get fired, but this had to happen. Way overdue. And that is an understatement, Mark, as you well know. Way overdue. A huge understatement. Brian, why wait? What's the upside? I agree. I think if you're going to do one or the other. I don't know what the point of announcing it today, but not having it take effect until end of the year. I don't know what the point, what point that serves. But I also see the other people that say, hey, let's just wait till the end of the year. We got 4 games left. Frankly, I wish that we could just cut the cord now, but it will make for a very awkward series of press conferences from here on out. I should make a poll in the chat. I got to figure out, maybe Kyle, who's our one and only mod for this show. Kyle, if you're out there, see if you can figure out how to make a poll on our YouTube stream to see if people think I ought to go down to Iowa City for the press conference tomorrow with Kirk. We got to make a poll for that. Anyways, let's go to our next caller. We got a number of people waiting on hold. Let's go to Doug, who's been on hold. Doug, I saw you shaking your head when I said that Brian Ferentz's offense has been by far worse than any other offense under Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah, you're 100% correct.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. But I wanted you to know that not all the offenses have been the same. 0-2, they went over 40 points 6 times. Brad Banks was a Heisman Trophy runner-up. That offense was amazing. 4 out of the 5 guys on the line went to the NFL.
When I say it's largely been the same, I'm talking about scheme. The difference in 2002 was, you're right, they had a difference maker at quarterback who was dual threat. I mean, dude ended up being a Heisman finalist. Insane. But that's really been the outlier. I mean, they've had a few years here and there, especially with Ken O'Keefe, where their offense was decent. 2002, they were actually really good offensively.
Yeah, amazing.
And that's one of the big baffles to me, is why it doesn't appear like Kirk Ferentz is interested in going back and trying to channel what they had in 2002. I know Brad Banks is a special guy, and he doesn't come around every day, but they have been very. I mean, the backyard football comment a couple of years ago from Brian. It just seems like if you're going to imitate or emulate any offense, it would be 2002, and it doesn't appear to me that they've made an effort to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and they haven't had a Brad Banks. I mean, I love Drew Tate. Drew Tate was. I know you're a little bit younger than me, but Drew Tate was awesome. I got to meet him a few times, and just a real tech. He kind of, like a young Don Patterson. He's just had a little swagger to him, and was from Texas, and was a really cool guy. And we've had good offensive players, but that scheme obviously doesn't work. 2 yards is not that good. That's horrible. But one reason why I'm not too worried about our football head coach is $7 million. That's what Kirk's making. We offer that to quite a few people. They take that job. I told you before, I thought Jay Norvell was a guy but he's struggling at Colorado State now. The one thing I don't like about Kirk that's different than Hayden, when Hayden left in 99, we had tons of candidates because he believed not hiring a coach, and you can talk to Don about this, any coach he hired had to have aspirations to be a head coach. And Kirk has had the same coordinators. He hasn't produced head coaches. Like, there's no lower level head coaches they produced. So he doesn't have a coaching tree. And he was wanting Brian to be his coaching tree. And, that's.
Well, it is. I will say what Kirk has done to retain people like Norm Parker and Phil Parker has been impressive.
Yeah.
Because those guys are head coaching material.
Yes.
And of course, Norm has passed on, and we miss Norm to death. But those two defensive coordinators have both been head coaching material, and I give Kirk credit for keeping them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way that Kirk has been able to, in one facet as far as the coaching tree is concerned. Hayden lost a lot of those guys. I mean, he lost Phil Snyder, he lost Barry Alvarez, and that's going to happen, right? You're going to lose guys to other programs when they're performing at a high level as coaches. So, obviously, the next question about Phil Parker and his future is a valid one. Yeah. If he's ready to, the way I look at Phil Parker's situation, if he's ready to retire, then he's going to retire.
Yeah.
And maybe he was ready to retire a year ago and he only stuck it out because Kirk was still here. But if he's just not ready to retire, Doug, what reason would he have to not either A, stay on, whoever the next head coach is, or B, take the head coaching position? What reason would he have at this point? I don't know why he would want to, up at his age, up and move to a new program somewhere, unless he's getting offers from a power in the SEC and he says, hey, that's the only thing left for me to do is to move to the SEC and be a head coach down there. But boy, to get the head coaching job at Iowa where everybody loves you, or at least stay on here, continue to make $1 million a year and retire when he's good and ready, that makes sense to me, but I'm not in his head.
Yeah, Phil's awesome, and that defense, all the defensive backs that we have in the NFL, it's like, why can't we have a receiver in the NFL? We have defensive backs. I mean, that's like the opposite position. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not too worried. Like I said, I want to talk basketball, but we'll do that later on tonight, maybe.
We'll be doing a live show after the exhibition game, Doug, and then we'll be back live with Don Patterson later. So there'll be plenty of time today to talk.
But I just I'm kind of shocked. I'm happy. I'm not worried. We have a great football program. Our defense is awesome. So why can't our offense be awesome? There's so many great football coaches out there. Anyone that's worried that we can't get a football coach that maybe we have to look in a different direction. That's the reason why I'm saying, Kirk came out of nowhere. Bob Stoops was the guy. He went to Oklahoma, and then we hired Kirk. And, overall, the 23 years have been average. We've been better than Nebraska over the last 23 years. If you would have said that in 99, people would have laughed at you. They've went through, 5 coaches since Frank Solich, and we've had our wins are always 8 or 9 wins. And so I'm not too worried. Yes, we can make a mistake and hire, somebody bad. I mean, there's a lot of bad coaches, but you asked one of the things I want. You do think Beth will be the AD? Right?
I don't know why she wouldn't be. I have no idea why she wouldn't be. Is there really? I mean, I know she's not, the only thing against her, I guess, is that she's never actually been a Big Ten level, Power 5 level AD. But I mean, heck, she was an interim, I think, at Minnesota. She was the AD at a MAC program. I mean, based on all the rave reviews from the coaches. Now, Kirk may not be a big fan of Beth Getz right now. I'm guessing maybe he isn't, maybe. But man, she has been endorsed by a lot of people. I just can't imagine them going anywhere else.
Who will be I mean, who will they listen to for that? Will they have a search committee? I mean, the OC, I imagine, will, if it is Kirk that stays, he's gonna hire the OC. But who would hire the head football coach? Like, do we have a committee? Do Beth have overall say? Like, how would that work, you think?
That's a great question. I mean, we haven't been in this position since 1999, but yeah, I mean, if Kirk decides to leave, and I don't know whether that will happen or not, but if he were to decide to leave, my guess is between Beth and the Board of Regents, there would be a diligent search. I would expect a diligent search. And like I said, I've made my stance very clear on where I feel on the whole head coaching spot. To me, there's at least one or two people that you talk to first before you even open the doors for other candidates. One being Phil Parker, because I just can't imagine, even I don't care how many times he said, well, he's happy as a DC. You pursue the guy because he's probably the best coordinator in football right now.
Yeah, my point was, I don't know Beth at all and her resume of hiring coaches, if she's got a lot of experience doing that, and what her track record is with hiring coaches. And obviously, she won a lot of brownie points today with the fans. But
you know what, Doug, that's a fair point. That's a good point. We don't know what type of a job hirer she is. We don't know. I think a lot of people obviously are happy about this decision, and certainly she's gotten the endorsement of the people already working on staff in the Iowa Athletic Department. But you're right; that's a big part of the job description, and that's one area that, for the most part, Gary Barta was decent with. I mean, I know Todd Licklider, that ended up not being a great hire, but Fran was a good hire. Rick Heller was a great hire. Joey Woody was a really good hire. I mean, he had success, and now, I mean, maybe Beth Getz will come in and be a great evaluator in going through that process. But like you said, if I anticipate the OC, whoever the next OC is, will probably be Bud Meyer, somebody within, and if not, then it'll be a Kirk decision. If he stays.
Again, I'm gonna throw a name, and a lot of Iowa fans will like this. I know he's 63 years old or something like that. Would Chuck Long at all be a candidate, even if Kirk stayed on as OC?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right.
No.
I know.
Not based on no.
Okay. All right. I that was just the name that I saw somewhere in the chat that Chuck Long, would go back to coaching maybe. But
not under Kirk. I can't.
Not under Kirk. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. All right, folks. We've got a bunch of people waiting to jump on. We've got none other than Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com. Tom.
Hey.
You're safe and sound. It's good to see you. You have had a busy day.
Got a few minutes to burn with you, and
let's.
So interesting day. By the way, Chuck won't be the OC.
Yeah,
I firmly believe that.
Yes.
I do a podcast with Chuck every week. For those who don't know.
Yeah, that's true. You do a podcast with Chuck every week. So let's just start from ground zero. And again, for people who are waiting in the chat and waiting in the queue, please be patient. We'll get to you.
Yeah, I'm only going to be here for about 10, 15 minutes, and then I got to go to Iowa City and get to cover Hawkeye for basketball. So
and I know this is going to prove maybe to be the busiest day of the year for you. So, Tom, tell us when you first started getting wind that this news was coming down that eventually broke officially from Iowa at 2:30.
Yeah, it was over the weekend where it just started percolating that there was something going on, and it was basically, I think the thing that they waited for more than anything else was, is Brian going to resign, or is Brian going to essentially be fired? And we saw the result today that Brian, it's one of those, go out on your feet or go out on your back. And, he chose to essentially, his contract is terminated, done after this year, declined to resign. And that's his choice. And he has every right to make that decision. And he will be paid, as he should, for his contract for this year. But they'll be moving on from him after the end of the season. Whenever that last game is, the bowl game that they play in, that will be Brian's last time as the Iowa OC. I know I see all these comments about people are celebrating like it's a Christmas or something, or Kirk's gonna make the hire, folks, and we know the type of coach that Kirk's gonna hire. And if you all are thinking that this is gonna, I've seen this party before. I saw it when Ken O'Keefe left. After years of hearing from Iowa fans, fire KOK, get rid of KOK. And they were excited about Greg Davis until they weren't excited about Greg Davis. And even that 15-0 season, or the 12-0 season, he, it just didn't, he was gone. Year after that was his last year as the OC, and everybody it was GD, and I'll let you figure out what GD means on the front of GD. And now, Brian, it's complicated. I think Brian had, I thought, 3 pretty solid years to begin. And the last 3 years have been really, really tough for him. So, and it just hasn't gotten any better. Now, is some of it this year injury related? Sure. And I think we might hear some of that from Kirk tomorrow, that maybe he got dealt a bad hand. And that's fair. You can say he didn't do very well even with all the pieces in place, with a healthy Cade McNamara, a healthy Eric All, a healthy Luke Lachey. They still weren't, it wasn't like they were lighting the world on fire offensively. But yeah, I just, I think this was the only decision that Beth had to make. And it was a bold move. A lot of interim ADs would not make this move.
So tell us why now, Tom. That's the big question in the chat. Why now? Why not wait? So,
the crazy thing is, I had an interview scheduled with Beth Getz this morning, 9:30 a.m., and she kept that interview. It was about some other stuff. It was name, image, and likeness, and some other things for our national desk at On3. And then at the end, I said, hey, I've got to ask you, because everything has been talked about in the last 48, 72 hours, been hearing a lot about Brian, and you're his supervisor. Can you give me an update there? And she just politely declined, said, I'm just going to, I'm going to give you a no comment on that. And I respect the question and appreciate the question, but that was it. So, so she didn't. So you knew something was kind of cooking today, and something was going to happen. So I think Beth is just. I think she heard. She's not deaf. She hears what was going on at Kinnick. She reads her email box. I mean, she knows that it was just not. He wasn't going to meet the points marker at all, and it was too much of a toxic situation. But I'll 100% Kirk's not on board with this. I'll say that. I know that, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. That doesn't mean he's a bad head coach or has his head in the sand. I just think he's not interested.
So my question is, and I'm sure you could guess my next question, based on what you and surmise. I don't think any of us know, but do you think Kirk is back in 2024?
Yeah. In fact, I think it doubles him down a little bit on the idea of coming back. I don't see him leaving. I don't think he wants to go out that way. And I think he wants to prove to everybody that he can continue to build winning football. And he's going to look at it from this perspective: is they're 6-2. They're the odds-on favorite to be in the Big Ten championship game. And if it wasn't for a bad ref call, maybe they're 7-1 right now. Here's the question: if Iowa was 7-1, does Beth Getz make this decision today? I don't know. It's interesting.
I would hope that the decision was not made prompted by a bad call. I mean,
Yeah.
you're realistic. You're looking at the situation and saying, hey, realistically, I think a lot of us will agree that they should be 7-1, but that doesn't have any impact. But you're right. From a PR perspective, I think it's an odd decision in general right now, what you said about kind of the toxicity.
Also, here's the other thing that you gotta remember too, is there are guys on the roster. Maybe there's some guys that weren't getting along with Brian, or that might have been thinking about leaving, and this gives you a chance to kind of rescue those relationships. And it gives you a chance, if this happened in December, boy, right before signing day, it's a lot of guys may instant react and go like, well, I'm going to decommit and I'm going to go commit somewhere else. Now you got a chance to work with these guys that are on that side of the ball. I know Blair Sanderson's going to be efforting some of the recruits on the offensive side of the ball tonight to see if we can get some comments from James Reeser and guys like that to see, what they're doing. I'm laughing at some of these comments. The Ari Gold, this best day of mine. And I'm like, I've seen this play before, folks. I've seen it before. Within 2 years, you're going to dislike this OC, whoever it comes in. I don't care who it is, unless Kirk takes the reins takes the governor off the Corvette. The Corvette's only going to go 55 miles an hour. You're not going to run it high.
So my question is it? Do you believe that it's somewhat of a foregone conclusion that it's Bud Meyer or bust for Kirk at this point?
I look over here in the private chat, and Jackson Johnson asked OC candidates. I've got a hot board up on our board right now, and fans can go take a peek at it. And I put some obvious candidates. Bud Meyer, obvious candidate. Tim Polasek, I think an obvious candidate at Wyoming. Got history with Iowa, Wisconsin guy, runs the football, knows how to do that stuff. I think he makes sense. He was well liked by Kirk too. Bud Meyer, Polasek, Paul Christ is a name that I threw out there because his nephew is on staff as an analyst right now. Paul and Kirk are pretty good. I wouldn't say good friends, but they're friendly. They're friendly. They don't have a cross thing to say about each other, and I think Paul's been around, and he's doing analyst work now. So I think he'd be an interesting name. And then there's some other names that I throw out. Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator at Washington, is going to get a lot of play from people because he's a native Iowan, but he's expensive. He's making $2 million a year at Washington right now. And Kalen DeBoer was always the one that Blair and I had an affection for, as not only replacing Kirk, but even before them being an OC, because he was out at Sioux Falls and just had a lot of ties to kind of this area of the world, and I think he would have worked well. But Grubb's a native Iowan. The other guy throughout, Andy Ludwig from Utah. There's some ties there. He knows the right people. I think he's a guy that. But both Grubb and Ludwig are guys that Nick Saban tried to get last year and couldn't get either of those guys, and ended up with Tommy Rees. So it's going to be an interesting candidate list. Somebody mentioned Seth Luttrell to me, the old North Texas coach. Who might fit. I didn't put him on the list, but somebody mentioned him to me today, so I threw him out as well.
So one thing I would ask, Tom, and you have a better feel for this than I do, but we've had minimal offensive coordinator changes since Kirk took over this program in '99. But you mentioned Ken O'Keefe, obviously the Greg Davis change. This is the first time we've seen a change where it was clearly, and even from PR perspective, it was clearly administration driven.
Yes.
And so that's my next question. Is there any influence then? Is there any way that the administration has a stronger influence with who Kirk brings on now?
No. Kirk will hire who he wants to hire.
Okay. Well, I don't disagree with that, for the record. I don't disagree with that.
He's got to be able to make his own hires. Assistant coaches should not be dictated to by administrators on who they should hire as an assistant coach. But if he went out and hired James FERENTZ or Steve FERENTZ, then we're going to be back in the same boat. I jokingly said that he should hire Steve and James as co-OCs
I see. Isn't Steve is he on South Dakota right now?
He's on South Dakota staff, coaching linebackers right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think James is maybe still in the practice squad for the Patriots. I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't.
Yeah. Last I knew he was. So
here's what I think though, and I'm reading that Brian Andreessen thing here. I agree. You know, Bud Meyer hire would not go over well with the Iowa fan base. I don't think. Now, could he be good? I don't know, but I just know that it's probably not going to go over particularly well with Hawkeye fans if it's John Budmeyer.
Well, I'll say this: he doesn't have the resume, Tom. He does not have.
He has 1 year. He was a quarterback coach at Wisconsin. He was 1 year at Colorado State as an OC and did not perform well. But that was a bad team coached by a guy who was not a very good coach.
That's another risky play. Now, he is a former quarterback. You would anticipate that he obviously knows more about the game than Brian.
And here's the thing. I'll tell you who would want John Budmeyer as the OC, Cade McNamara.
Yeah, sure.
Because Cade loves Coach Bud. I mean, all those guys love, and so does Deacon. Deacon loves Coach Bud. I mean, those are the guys that Coach Bud was the first guy to hire to offer both those guys.
So, I'm curious, Tom, and I know you got to get going, so I want to wrap this up. But you mentioned recruiting, and certainly people need to head over to HawkeyeReport.com and follow you and Blair Sanderson and your whole team. But what impact do you think this will have on the current roster? I mean, I know you brought up some guys that maybe were considering moving on, and we don't have to name specifics, but is there a chance that Iowa loses some guys who came here with the expectation of playing for Brian?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there because it's a fair question to make when an OC moves on. I know, like Marco Lainez is a perfect example of a guy who was originally committed to Ken O'Keefe, anyways, right? Yeah. He stuck with Brian, but I would be surprised.
I think everybody kind of knows that Coach Bud's been really the guy that's kind of Xing and Oing with the quarterbacks or breaking down film with them. You know, Brian's expertise is not coaching quarterbacks.
Correct.
You know, that's the thing. Like with Palasek, people don't realize he was a quarterback in college. So I mean, he knows quarterback play. I know somebody else asked about what about Drew Tate or Ricky Stanzi. I think Drew's up in Canada coaching again. I'm not sure. And Rick's doing GOTA, this movement thing that he's doing. He has not coached.
Well, here's my personal thing, Tom. I'm tired of people throwing out former players and just assuming they need to be added to the staff. We don't know that Drew Tate would be. We don't even know that Drew Tate would be a very good quarterbacks coach. He's coached.
Yeah. Somebody's asking on here too if Brian would stay on as an O-line coach. No, you can't. Name a business where that happens, where a guy gets fired from the job and then he's going to come back and coach. It's not going to happen.
So
Brian's probably going to be in the NFL somewhere coaching, I would guess.
Yeah, that's my next question. Where do you anticipate Brian being in 24?
Yeah, I would say NFL. That's my best guess. Is he'll probably be coaching somewhere. You know, it depends on where Bill Belichick is. I'm sure Bill Belichick is going to coach somewhere next year. I don't know if it'll be in New England anymore, and Bill's going to put together a staff, and wouldn't shock me if Brian is on that staff coaching offensive line. Or tight ends.
Yeah. Last thing for me, Tom, and I think you brought up a number of candidates, and I know people aren't going to like hearing people like Paul Chryst just because of style.
No, I know they will.
But when you accept the fact, I actually agree with you staunchly on that, Tom, because when you accept the fact that Kirk is not going to be going and hiring, he's probably not going to hire a guy like Josh Gaddis. He's not going to hire somebody that's going to overhaul the offense, somebody that fits in with what he's comfortable with, how he wants to operate this offense. And I've also a guy, Paul Chryst, who's close to him. He's got a relationship with John Budmeyer. To me, that would be as ideal of a hire given those stipulations as possible. You know, he's a former quarterback, former head coach, successful at Wisconsin. I know people viewed that Wisconsin offense as boring like Iowa's, but this is what you're going to get as long as Kirk is here. So,
yeah, I don't see Kirk just like throwing up his hands and saying, you know what, RPOs, spread. Let's go.
No, I don't think. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting when you bring up the idea that Kirk is doubling down now.
That's what he's always done.
You're right.
I go back to after the 2007 season, and everybody's clamoring for spread offenses and everything, and that was the hot new thing. And Kirk's like, we're doubling down. And guess what? 2008, they really got it cranking. Sean Green, at the end of the year, that team was playing as good as anybody in the country. In 2009, won an Orange Bowl. So it's proven that what he does pays off. Now, after that 2014 season, the Hawk Slayer Bowl, as Brian would call it, against Tennessee, and they made some minor adjustments, but it was on the edges. It wasn't how they played, but it was like, hey, we're going to practice in the morning. Hey, we're going to do some more developmental thing, the slight edge, the book reading together, and they moved practices and things of that nature. And it worked, and they were 12-0, So every time he's faced rocky waters or choppy waters, I guess would be not rocky, but choppy. He's always gone back to his safe harbor of what he does and doubles down on it. And it has worked. I can't say it hasn't. It's worked, but
with the exception being doubling down on Brian for as long as
I you could have made the case, and I think Gary tried to make the case that maybe, in hindsight, you wonder if Gary wishes he would have just taken care of this last year. When he made this contract deal, maybe he should have just said, you know what, we're gonna move on. But Joe Redlinger has a good point. The wide receiver development's got to happen. The routes got to happen. Route concepts have got to get better. They've got to find somebody who can develop quarterbacks. Just do.
I think it's fair to say that Kelton Copeland will not be taking over as the OC in 2024. Is that fair?
That's fair.
That would not be a good look either. And if people, by the way, my only reason for, why I think maybe they would have been easier to just cut ties now, and I'm sure Kirk wouldn't have wanted that from any perspective, but hey, you've got 4 games to do what Wisconsin did with Jim Leonard and give John Budmeyer a 4-game audition.
Mm-hmm. I thought about that. And I think there's some merit to it, but my response was also, I don't think Bill Walsh or Kyle Shanahan could get this offense going in 4 games with the current cast of characters.
Tom.
You'd like to see Kyle Shanahan try?
Sure. Why not? I'd love to see it.
Bill Walsh can't, unfortunately, but maybe we could get Kyle Shanahan. Maybe we get Mike Shanahan. There you go.
Well, hey, if Ryan Grubb's on the list, then let's not stop with. I know he's got the Iowa connections, but man, that would be I think he's got a head coaching position waiting for him somewhere.
That's kind of what I think, is that he's going to get maybe not a Power 5 position, but maybe.
Yeah.
If Lincoln Riley decides to jump out of USC, are they going to call Ryan Grubb? Maybe.
Tom, what's the last 3 years especially been like for you as far as the heat you've taken, and unfairly? I mean, it's not what's happened within the confines of Iowa football and the Brian Ferentz situation is not your fault, but you've taken a lot of heat. What's the last 3 years been like for you?
Oh, it's been joyous. I mean, that's just part of the job. I mean, people blame you for things that I've yet to call a play at the University of Iowa. Never called one.
Yeah.
But
hey, are you on the candidate list? Are you on Kirk's candidate list?
They don't want to hire me. I could barely write a good paragraph, let alone run an offense.
Well, don't sell yourself short, Tom. people need to check out your stuff. HawkeyeReport.com.
Hey, and we got a great special going too. It's 50% off for the year, or it's just $1, just $1 for the first month. So stop by and join us. Appreciate it. Corey, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to you Saturday after Northwestern. Should be a fun one. I may see you tomorrow. I'm assuming that I haven't seen any press release on this specifically. I'm assuming normal time for Kirk's
Normal
presser.
time.
45.
Normal time. It'll be a normal time, and bring the popcorn. Should be a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com. Appreciate it, Tom, as always, for being a part of the show, for giving us insight on when all this began to transpire, apparently over the weekend. And again, the news, if you're just joining us, Iowa OC Tom Kakert. See, I'm already anointing him as the next OC. Iowa OC Brian Ferentz will not return following the 2023 season. He is out as the coordinator effective, 5 games from now after the bowl game. We've got 4 games left in the regular season. I guess it could be 6 games if they play in the Big Ten championship game. So, again, we're here at least for the next half hour to hour. I'm willing to run this thing right up until basketball game time. So, we'll see what we can do. We got almost 800 people here live right now. I know a lot of people are probably getting off work 4:35. Be sure to share the stream out. If you've done it already once, please do it again. Be sure to hit that like button if you're here, folks, as we continue to get more callers a part of the show as we go forward. And then again, this evening, following Iowa-Quincy men's basketball exhibition, I'll have a short post game for everybody at 9, and then a live show with Don Patterson at 9:30. Yes, I will be busy. If anybody wants to deliver me a pizza, it would be very much appreciated. Paul's on the line. Paul, welcome.
Hey, Corey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Paul?
Well, it's just interesting that after that Minnesota game, we said that will Lady Beth be an administrator and make a statement, and I guess she has.
I applaud her. Based on everything I've heard, and this is one question I didn't ask Tom, but it sounds like there was some pressure above her. But you're right. She's the one who pulled the trigger on this, and she's the one that's going to get the majority of the credit for this. And it just makes Gary Barta look worse, is all it does. It just makes him look worse because this decision should have been made prior to the season starting. And, I understand. I think what Tom brought up about signing day, National Signing Day, and possibly being able to use this as incentive to get players to return. I think that's all very valid, and kudos to Beth Getz for making this decision. I don't care if people are like, well, why'd she make it after the bye week? Why couldn't she have made it a week ago? These things take time, and there were conversations that were being had. And again, by all accounts, Brian was given an opportunity to step down, and he chose not to. Zeppelin 810 in the chat with the super chat. Thank you, Zeppelin. RIP Brian. Kirk is on the hot seat now, and Zach. This is huge. Go Hawks all the way from Houston. Don't know Drew Tate's contract details, but would you be up for him as QB's coach, offensive assistant? I've said this before. I have no idea if Drew Tate would be qualified as a quarterback's coach. And based on Kirk and Drew's relationship when he was a player, I would doubt that happens. I don't know that Drew fits within the confines. First of all, he's not qualified to be the Iowa OC. And whoever they bring in, whether it be John Budmeyer or somebody else, will probably be QB's coach and OC. But Drew Tate does not have the coaching resume, in my opinion, to get that job. Go ahead, Paul.
I wouldn't agree with Drew either. And Iowa fans have a really short memory. I remember when Drew got injured his senior year, and they were ranting and raving that I believe Christensen was the guy who replaced him. They wanted him to replace him because he was playing better. Because Drew's senior year didn't go all that well.
Yeah, and he's a bit of a
just repeat what Tom says.
Yeah,
Iowans have a short.
They're not hiring Drew Tate. They're not hiring Chuck Long. Make that very clear. I don't even know why I have to say this, but for the people, I've literally had people in the past year or two say, well, why don't they hire Bob Stoops as the OC? Bob Stoops is a defensive coach. He doesn't know anything about offense.
Yep.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he doesn't know offense. So, I mean, that's a ridiculous comment, but people that don't know better. But they're not hiring any of the Stoops brothers to be the next OC. They're not bringing Mike Stoops in. They're not bringing Jay Norvell. He's not coming from Colorado State, being the head coach at Colorado State to be the OC at Iowa. He was a defensive guy as well. So it'll probably be Bud Meyer or maybe somebody else like a Paul Chryst, somebody who Kirk is comfortable with. Assuming
we'll see.
Seems very adamant that Kirk will stick around.
I know you've been saying, like, well, why are they keeping Brian for 4 games? And I think it's pretty obvious why. It hasn't been said yet. If you fire Brian now, I think you risk Kurt leaving with him. And then you have the last 4 games without an OC or a head coach.
Say that again. Say that whole thing again.
So if you fire Brian now, he can't coach the last 4 games. You'd probably lose Kurt on top of it.
Okay, but I understand.
They would both be at the same time. Yeah,
I can't
and
imagine.
that's why I think that's why they're letting him fill out the contract. Is that if Beth said you're not stepping on the football field anymore, I think you risk losing Kurt when you have a 6-2 record in the middle of the year.
I cannot
I
imagine.
think that's why. I think that's why it was done, though.
Boy, I can't imagine Kirk Ferentz walking away from this program mid-season. That would not be a good look.
No, but he's tripled down on Brian a bunch of times, so I think he'd be with his son on that one. I really think he would do that.
Well, to me, if you're not gonna listen, if you're gonna keep Brian on for the final 4 games of the season, then the argument could be made just wait until the end of the year. But Tom brought up the recruiting point and the transfer portal point. That's all fair. That's all legitimate. If I was in charge, not knowing everything that went on in the background, certainly with Kirk, he's obviously, I'm sure he's not in agreement with this. I would have tended to lean more towards just cut the cord now and give John Budmeyer an audition. But maybe this was the compromise between Kirk and Beth and the administration.
I think that's exactly what this was a compromise. I think that's exactly what happened. We probably will never know if it was, but I think that's why it was just an odd thing done today. I think that's why the cord wasn't cut now, because I think Kirk could have probably left with Brian, and then you're in big trouble.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
That's why I think it was done this way. That's just my opinion. I don't have any inside info, but just looking from the outside in, that's I think why it was done the way it was.
Yeah. No, I won't argue with it because I don't know better. And, now the attention moves to, does this offense look any different in the final 4 games with Brian? And I don't know why it would. So,
no, it's not going to. And no,
it's going to be I'll tell you what,
possible.
I'll tell you what, it'll be a fast
possible. Iowa could lose their last 4 games.
I don't think so. They're not winning because of the offense anyways, Paul. They're not winning any games.
I agree with that.
What's going to change based on this news? What's going to change?
Nothing. But it wouldn't shock me if they lost their last 4 games.
Oh, I don't think that's going to happen. But
I hope it doesn't happen, but it wouldn't shock me.
If that happens and they end up, what would they be, 6-6?
Yeah.
6-6? Yeah. No, that's not. That won't happen. But anyways.
What year was that? Was that 06 or 07 when that happened?
07, wasn't it?
07, yep. 06, 07. I couldn't remember which year, but
yeah, 6-6 and missed out on a bowl game, right?
Yep. So it has happened before. We'll see. But by the way, I see the over and under has come out. It's 29.5. I'm still going to bet the under.
29.5. That's yeah. I know the under is. I've heard this. The under is hit on every single historically low line that I was produced in recent time. So I would expect. Yeah, I can't imagine. How could the offense go in there and light it on fire? Now, I've heard some people say, well, could the players all of a sudden have a fire lit under them and play for their coach? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Brian is rallying anybody at this point to go out there and play for him on Saturday. I cannot imagine.
No, I think what you've seen is what you're going to get the rest of the year.
Yep, I agree.
But yeah, I just applaud Beth for finally being an administrator and just saying, this is done. This is over. Not doing it anymore.
Yeah. And
I was going to say what Tom said. Like, this was truly because of transfer portal and recruiting and stuff. I mean, this is exactly what it was for. Why it was done now. And like I said, I'm glad it's over. It's just a bad PR look anyway. I mean, when you're the laughing stock of the college football country, I mean, it just looks terrible.
I thought this is an interesting comment in our chat from Tyler. Call that North Dakota State quarterback coach back and get him here. So Tyler is not referring to Tom Polisak. He is referring to Randy Hedberg. And if you've only been following the show for less than a year, you probably don't know this, but Randy Hedberg was interested in the Iowa quarterback coach job when Ken O'Keefe walked away. And he was told, sorry, no thanks. Brian's our QB's coach. Now, is Randy Hedberg, I think he's, how old is Randy? I think he's almost probably in the 60s. Is he qualified to be the OC at Iowa? I don't know. I don't want to say no because I don't know that. I know he's been the passing game coordinator at North Dakota State. They've been really successful with quarterback development. They developed guys like Easton Stick and Carson Wentz and Trey Lance. So, boy, there'd be worse choices, I would think. But I don't know that he's a candidate. I mean, the fact that they had the opportunity to bring him on as a quarterback's coach, and you could have made him the passing game coordinator and kept Brian as the run game coordinator, that might have saved this offense to an extent. They chose not to do that. I doubt they go down that road, but that's an interesting comment.
Yeah, I find that interesting too. I don't think he's going to leave. Why would you leave the most successful FCS program in the country right now? Why would you leave? Unless you got buku bucks. That's about the only reason you leave.
Yeah. I agree. He does. I will say this. He was interested in moving down. He was interested in the job when the opening was there, a year and a half ago. And it sounds like that's a move down from Fargo, but Randy Hedberg has some connections down here, it sounds like. But again, I don't know that he's qualified. He might be interested, frankly. If you called Randy Hedberg, he might be interested in the job, frankly. But
I could see him saying no. I could see him saying no because you said no to me being QB's coach, and all of a sudden you want me here. No thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of egos amongst football coaches.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. But I know Kirk is going to hire somebody he's comfortable with, and I doubt that's Randy Hedberg. As much as I may like that, or other people may like that.
It'll be interesting to see who they hire. There's going to be a lot of open people at the season's end, so it's going to be kind of like a transfer portal thing. There's going to be a lot of people interested, and we'll see what happens there. And yeah, I'm curious. It's going to be an interesting hiring process for sure on who they want to hire.
Absolutely, sir. I appreciate you calling in as always. And if I don't talk to you later tonight, we'll talk after Northwestern Saturday.
Absolutely. And I guess for any offensive coordinators or offensive mind coaches out there, submit your resume to the University of Iowa football program.
There you go, Paul. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I hope it's a fair search. I said that after the quarterback's coaching job opened up. I hope it's a fair search. I was just trying to rack my mind. 2 years ago, when the quarterback coach job opened up at Iowa, I remember running through some candidates, and I'm trying to think of who those candidates were. One was Bill Lynch, former Indiana head coach. Bill Lynch, I believe, is a former QB's coach, I believe. What's Bill Lynch doing now? I don't know that. Again, what's Kirk's relationship with Bill Lynch? But at the time, 2 years ago, he was a guy that I brought up. And he's retired. He's been retired, I believe, since 2019. He is 69 years old. Probably not going to be bringing Bill Lynch in at 69 years old. But he is a former OC, former quarterbacks coach. In case you forgot who Bill Lynch was, he was the OC QB's coach at Northern Illinois back in the 80s. He then ended up being the head coach at Butler, eventually transitioned to an offensive coordinator role at Ball State, then was quarterbacks coach at Indiana. Ball State head coach, then ended up being the OC and tight ends coach at Indiana, and then was the head coach for a 4-year stint at Indiana from 2007 to 2010. Not endorsing Bill Lynch as the next coach, but there's an example of somebody that maybe Kirk has a relationship with because of the Big Ten connections. But again, at 69 years old, is Bill Lynch going to come out of retirement to be the OC at Iowa? Probably not. I think you're more likely going to get a guy like Paul Chryst to come back than a guy like Bill Lynch. But he's the type of person I at least throw out there, right, as a possibility of someone Kirk may be comfortable with. Ben in the super chat here. Corey, any insight on what happened at the meetings with Beth, Brian, and Kirk? I assume Kirk was doing whatever possible to keep his son. Any info? Ben, all I can tell you is what I've already said, and Tom brought it up. Kirk obviously didn't agree with the decision. I can tell you that based on what I've heard, there was pressure from above above Beth, and ultimately you applaud her for making this decision. But she was being pressured by the powers that be, her oversight as well. But I don't have any specific info on those meetings with Beth, Brian, and Kirk. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall during those meetings? But we'll probably never know. Carrie says, was definitely needed. Is it weird that they waited until game week to do it versus last week? You could perceive it that way, Carrie, but I go back to, we just don't know how these things are happening behind the scenes, and these things take time, and who knows what the conversations were like prior. So, whether it happened last week or today or, next week, it's all the same in my opinion. I don't think it changes the outlook for the offense because the offense is terrible. So if anything, maybe it makes them better. I don't know. My mini Ditka in the chat. Corey, why do you hope Kirk doesn't leave? He's the whole problem. Iowa isn't going to get any OC that's good while he's there, and nothing will change as long as he's there. That is a complicated response for me, mini Ditka, partly because Kirk deserves a lot of credit for the success this program has had over the last 24 years, including on defense and on special teams. He is the head coach. He's been able to retain those guys and hire really good people to coach various positions. Now, he has not been real effective at hiring great offensive coordinators, and his system maybe is not indicative to having very good offenses, with the exception being like 2002 when they had a dual threat guy in Brad Banks. Now, the reason I don't want to see him leave is because I hope he can leave under good terms, on good terms, under good circumstances. I wish that he hadn't doubled down as many times as he did with Brian Ferentz, but I just hope he is allowed the dignity to leave on his own. And I'm sure I was not forcing him out right now. If he leaves at season's end, that's his choice. But I just think that'd be a sad way to end a guy I have a lot of respect for. But you're right. He's had a huge blind spot. It was brought up earlier by our caller. He's had a huge blind spot with this situation. And maybe it's not even a blind spot. Maybe it's just a blatant disregard for, what's best for this program. And I understand your perspective when you're saying, hey, look, I want Kirk gone. I get it. I understand. And I'm not saying I wouldn't welcome that or I would welcome that. I don't have a comment on that, but I would just like Kirk to make a good decision and restore this offense and keep things the way they are. But maybe that's not possible to do as long as Kirk is there, because like you said, maybe the offense just doesn't change at all as long as he's there. I do think it will get better with a better play caller and a guy who understands the passing game better, even if that's John Budmeyer as a former quarterback. In a lot of ways, I think he's more qualified than Brian Ferentz ever was to be a play caller, to be a quarterback's coach, to be the OC. Cole, appreciate the super chat, Cole. Boo, Beth goers, boo. Boo, Beth goers, boo. I don't know what that means, but thank you, Cole, for the $1.99 super chat, of which YouTube will take 35%, whatever it is. Thank you, Cole. BJ says, is Phil able to do the same thing when he is OC and not just DC? I don't think it's a given that he becomes head coach and there isn't a fall off. Well, nothing's a given, BJ, but how else do coordinators prove themselves? The players love Phil Parker, and he's widely respected among former players, current players, etc. I just think he would have to be probably number one on my list. Erica with a super chat. Thank you, Erica. If Kirk is going to put the team first, they need to get the best OC that money can buy and give them full freedom to run their own offense. I agree with you, Erica, but it's likely as long as Kirk stays, that will not happen. He's not going to be given the OC unlimited control about what that offense looks like. And in large part, he's not going to do that because he's going to hire somebody that is comfortable with what he wants, and he knows that in advance. He's not going to bring in a guy like Ryan Grubb and say, well, Ryan, I've hired you, so now what do you want to do? I think those conversations are going to happen a lot sooner rather than later. And again, Kirk's going to know what he wants before making that hire. Lemansky, thank you for the super chat, Lemansky. Good news from Marco, ex-QB as an OC, I am hoping. All right, let's go back to our phone lines. James is on the line. James, welcome.
Hi, Corey. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Kind of feeling optimistic right now. I feel like today we took a step in the right direction, but now, really and truly, it's going to be hard to really and truly know what the correct next step is.
What do you mean?
Like, who do we go and get, you know? Like, obviously I feel like it can't be any worse than what we had.
Well, your question, unfortunately, James, your question was formulated in a sense that would give an indication that somehow we as a fan base, or even Iowa as an administration as a whole, is in charge of making this decision. And as Tom brought up earlier, Kirk is making the decision. So when you say, well, who are we going to go get? I understand what you're saying when you say that, when you ask that question, but the better question is, who is Kirk going to hire?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, like, that being said, like, it's like Tom said, we've seen this horse and pony show before, when it was, oh, let's get rid of Ken O'Keefe. Then we were all happy about Greg Davis. A couple years later, well, let's get rid of Greg Davis. And look what we've had since.
Well, just because I want to just clear this up too, just because Kirk has had a bad history of hiring good offensive coordinators does not mean that every coordinator under Kirk is destined to fail.
No, and that's not what I'm saying, but
it's possible that they've just hired subpar offensive coordinators, and Brian was the worst of those three. They've only hired three. They've had three offensive coordinators in 24 years. So, if Kirk is willing to objectively hire somebody that's going to make this offense better, yeah, there's a ceiling on where this offense can be with scheme and just philosophy and whatnot. But none of us should doubt that this offense can be substantially better with a better play caller, a better OC, a better quarterbacks coach.
Yeah. But then we also run into, even if we do get a better play caller and a better quarterback coach, how much is Kirk going to have an effect on what is called and what kind of scheme is ran?
I really don't think Kirk is talking in the ear of the offensive coordinator from play to play. I think this comes back to philosophy, and Kirk has hired guys that fit into his philosophy. So, yeah, I've never bought into that narrative. And Don Patterson has made that very clear that he doesn't buy into that narrative either. Kirk Ferentz is not a play caller, nor has he. And so, believe me, he hasn't been making the calls to Brian on game day. Now, certain situations on a third and critical or something like that, sure, he's probably gonna put a bug in Brian's ear, or whoever the OC is. But in general, he has hired guys that run a system that Kirk is comfortable with, and they have not historically recruited well enough, or I should maybe say, or they have not had maybe qualified enough of play callers that can run those systems effectively. Because you could argue they are at a disadvantage trying to run this pro style run first type of offense that for many people seems to be antiquated. They're already at a disadvantage, and so you have a below average offensive mind back there. Then you're only going to complicate the situation. And right now, I hate to say this, but based on what we've seen, Brian Ferentz was a below average offensive mind as of right now in his career, with a guy who also had no experience coaching quarterbacks and no experience calling plays until he got here. That's a recipe for disaster. And then on top of that, he's had problems recruiting here. It's just a snowball effect. So if they can get a guy, I brought up Paul Chryst. I know people don't like that name. A lot of people don't like the name, but he's a former quarterback. He's been a head coach. He understands offense. Even though it's not the offense a lot of people want, it's probably going to be the offense that we get. So let's get the best candidate that's out there with those parameters, right? Does that make sense, James?
Absolutely. I was going to say, really and truly, comes right down to it. It's like you said, Kirk's going to hire a guy that Kirk's comfortable with. And it's going to be a guy, and it's not going to be a guy that we're going to come out and we're going to run the spread or run RPOs. It's going to be somebody that's got some sort of same philosophy as what Kirk does, and that is comfortable with the run first style, pro style offense.
Correct.
And as an Iowa fan, people, we need to expect that. We don't need to go into this thinking, oh, we're going to go and we're going to be running the spread. No, that's not at all going to happen.
And so I think the point with all of this is let's hire, I say let's, this is going to be Kirk's decision, hire the best guy within those confines. So
absolutely, that's what we need.
maybe there are people that are more qualified to run this system than Paul Chryst. And I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Just because Paul Chryst was head coach at Wisconsin a year ago does not mean he's most qualified to run this style of offense. But, at first glance, given the connections to Kirk and John Budmeyer and the Big Ten and just everything that we know he stands for, he's the first name that comes to mind.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you something. Yeah,
Sure.
or mention something, I've heard you ask, and I've seen, I don't know how many people online asking, well, why are they keeping Brian till the end of the season? Well, number one, it's like Tom said, announcing it now, we have signing day and all of that, but people also need to remember, we can't install a whole new offensive scheme 8 games into the season. Even if we were to fire him today, and today was his last day, the offense is still going to almost look the same as it is now.
The difference is, yes, but the difference is if they had just cut the cord with Brian Ferentz right now, you could audition someone else, whether that be, it'd probably be John Budmeyer. I don't know who else it would be. It's not going to be Liddell Betts or Kelton Copeland. Copeland has experience as a former quarterback, but he would not become the OC. So my point is, it would have at least given them an opportunity to audition John Budmeyer with the same offense, an offense he's obviously familiar with. He's been on staff here this is year 2, and he's been working with the quarterbacks anyways. So that's my only problem with keeping Brian on for the final 4 games, is that you're missing out on an opportunity at auditioning potentially the next guy. And I think there's a decent chance that Budmeyer's the next guy.
I mean, to an extent, I would agree with that. But if we're going to do it like that, then we open ourselves up to the possibility of missing out on somebody that's, quite frankly, maybe got a better resume.
Well, just because you audition John Budmeyer doesn't mean you have to hire him. You let him coach for 4 games, and then you make it an open search like Wisconsin did. Wisconsin auditioned Jim Leonard as their head coach last year. They obviously didn't see enough from Jim Leonard, and they went out and got Luke Fickell as their head coach. Why couldn't you do the same thing with offensive coordinator?
Honestly, with the players that we got right now, and being depleted with injuries like we are right now, it's like Tom said, I don't even think Kyle Shanahan could show much what we got in 4 games.
I don't agree with that. I know that Tom said that. I don't agree with that. I think that's selling the people on this offense short. They've got some talent on this offense. All right. I just don't agree with that. I don't. Because if I did agree with that, if I bought into that narrative, James, then I would stop having conversations with Coach Patterson every week about why can't we be creative? Why don't we use waste downs? There are ways you can improve the offense with the current personnel and system in place. The problem is they haven't done anything. They haven't improved personnel to this point. They haven't improved creativity, play calling, any of these things. You can do other things within the confines of who you have and the scheme that's in place. I don't agree that the idea that Coach Shanahan couldn't come in here, Kyle Shanahan couldn't come in here and somehow make a difference is, I think, absurd.
I mean, I think, saying Kyle Shanahan, that's a bit of a stretch. I'll agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This year, especially like our offensive line, like to me, like our offensive line play has been just as bad as what it was last year.
It has not been good. No.
And
it hasn't been good.
Somebody was telling me at work that like it looked like Minnesota was shoving our offensive line around like they're like Iowa's offensive line was a bunch of high school players. And quite frankly, there's no reason for it if you ask me. I don't know if it's offensive coordinator. I don't know if it's our O-line coach. I don't know if it's strength and conditioning, but I feel like this is just the beginning. What happened today, and I feel like it's going to be like peeling back layers of an onion to find the issue.
Well, this had to happen. There was no route.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
So this
is definitely a start in the right direction, but
me tell you, the start in the right direction was Gary Barta leaving during the
Oh,
offseason.
absolutely.
Direction.
Absolutely, for sure.
James, I appreciate you calling in, sir, and feel free to call in later with Coach Patterson on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. All right, we've got Ryan, Jackson, and Will all on hold, and we've also got, I want to make sure we read the official press release, and I tweeted this out when it broke. I know some people have to jump the gun. They can't just let Iowa announce things when they choose to announce it, but I know along with Tom, we both, Tom actually, he knew about this far before I did, and he was elegant enough with how he handled the situation to wait to publish anything based on the fact that Iowa planned on publishing it at 2:30, which they did. Let me share the official press release from Iowa. This is courtesy of Sports Information. Let me get rid of the comment. Let's get rid of the banner. And let's see if we can make this. There we go. All right. We'll get rid of that bottom ticker as well. So here is the official release from the University of Iowa. Statement from Beth Getz, Henry B., and Patricia B. Tippy, Interim Director of Athletics Chair. She says, and I quote, "Anyone who loves Iowa football recognizes both the success and challenges that have brought attention to our program this season. Our struggles on offense, coupled with the offensive coordinator's contract, make this a unique situation. After conversations with head coach Kirk Ferentz, Coach Brian Ferentz, and President Wilson, I informed Brian that our intention is for him to be with us through the bowl game, but this is his last season with the program. Making this known today is in the best interest of the program and its loyal fans. It provides clarity during this pivotal time in the schedule. It is not my practice to be involved in assistant coaching decisions, and certainly not to make public such a change during a season. Our priority is to put all our student athletes in the best position to have both short-term and long-term success on and off the field. Our football team has a group of outstanding young men and talented athletes who at 6-2 have a lot to play for. As a former athlete, I know every opportunity to put on the jersey is a cherished one. As Hawkeyes, let's continue to support all our coaches, staff, and student athletes in their pursuit of a Big Ten championship and bowl victory." That is official from Beth Getz, Interim Director of Athletics at Iowa. And you saw her explanation as to why they're not making a change. She's not forcing a change mid-season. She noted that her priority is to put all student athletes in the best position to have both short-term and long-term success. That's a fair statement, and you can disagree with it if you want. But again, I go back to overall, this was the right decision to be made. Whether you think it should have been made in 4 to 5 weeks, I wouldn't blame Beth Getz one iota for making the decision now. And her decision not to cut the cord mid-season, I can understand that point of view. I can also understand the point of view of like what Wisconsin did a year ago with Paul Chryst. Maybe a different situation, but they wanted to audition a guy, and they got that audition and made a decision thereof. But this is where we're at, and kudos to Beth Getz for making, I think, a smart decision, a decision that should have been made by the previous AD, Gary Barta, a long time ago. Let's go back to the phone line. Ryan is with us. Ryan, welcome.
Hey, Corey. How are you today?
How do you think?
Probably bittersweet, huh?
Bittersweet? No, yeah. I'm not real
bittersweet. Well, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, this is really good news. And
I'm not
getting fired. I have nothing personal against Brian. It's sad when somebody loses their job, but this had to happen for the best interest of the program. And we don't know that this means the offense is just going to end up being good next year, or even semi-proficient. But this was a step in the right direction. This had to happen.
Well, this is today was important for the simple fact of accountability. Now, I've said on your show several times, I've said privately in many conversations, I don't think Brian is even close to the whole problem, but from an accountability standpoint, it had to happen. I think a big reason why we were such a national punchline is that we were the only school in the country that seemed to tolerate bad performance. And, The previous AD enabled, and finally somebody else comes in. And this is honestly the first time in 25 years that Kirk has been held accountable to something. This was obviously not his decision. Now we could, go on forever about how Kirk kind of put himself in this situation all along. What frustrates me is Brian was struggling for a while as offensive coordinator. When Ken O'Keefe left after the 21 season, now, not to say that Spencer Petras was good, but he's clearly regressed under Brian as quarterback coach. Now, I know Nathan Stanley even said that they don't really work much on fundamentals and things like that, which kind of makes me think from a quarterback standpoint, what are we even doing here? Do I think that a whole lot is going to change? No. Do I think that we're going to, for as excited as most of the fan base is today, do I think we're going to be disappointed in the long haul? Yes. What I can't help but laugh at, now I understand why he's on the list, but are you kidding me? Ryan Grubb being on the list? Don Patterson has a better chance as defensive coordinator next year, and I know he's an offensive coach, than Ryan Grubb. Part of the problem there is he's too successful. He puts up too many points, and that's that quote-unquote sexy style that Kirk does not seem to like. Kirk would much rather have the smash mouth, gutted out type of offense, beat them on 4 yards at a time versus taking a chance and throwing 35 yards downfield. I try to choose my words very carefully when it comes to Kirk, because I do recognize the very good things that he's done. I consider him the best coach in Iowa history, but I think a lot of that has to do with Norm, then Phil, and LeVar. He had some great coordinators on two sides of the ball. And I hate to say it, but I just will never feel too confident as long as Kirk Ferentz has anything. I don't think he belongs anywhere near an offense, period.
Hey, real quick, Ryan, can you read this comment for our viewers?
I think Corey should be the coach. He obviously has it all figured. Well, I think Corey knows what he's talking about.
I got it all.
And you didn't say that you were an offensive genius, but as a fan, you know what good, efficient football and what bad football looks like.
Just waiting for Kirk to light up my phone, Ryan. People actually think I'm going down for the press conference tomorrow. I'm actually going down for an interview.
Well, I mean, you're going to have a significant part of the fan base that is going to be loyal to Kirk no matter what. He has many pluses, but he also has some fatal flaws. And his management on the offensive side of the ball is a major fatal flaw. I'm sorry. When you go back, and Kirk is one who likes to go back and look at history. He likes to, refer back to the early 80s a lot. Well, let's go back to the early 2000s. When Kirk had his best teams, what was the common denominator? Typically a mobile quarterback, somebody who could run. Now, granted, Stanzi wasn't terribly mobile, but he could still run. Compared to Deacon Hill, he's Brad Banks from a running standpoint. So what do? We go to statues. And in the case of our last two quarterbacks, statues that can't throw very accurate. Strong arm.
I thought Spencer Petras was fairly mobile.
No. No.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Well, and then, the other part, and I'm not at all trashing Nathan Stanley. I would give anything to have him as our quarterback right now. But in my opinion, sophomore Nathan Stanley was every bit as good, if not a little better than senior Nathan Stanley.
I've made that comment a couple of times. If you look at some of Nate's best performances, 2019 against USC was one of his better ones, but he had a huge game against Iowa State in 2017. It was his first career road start and had a great performance against Ohio State in that win in 2017. Now he also struggled in Madison that next one. So you know, but you're right.
Nathan Stan. No, the difference is against a bad team like Minnesota last week, Nathan Stanley would have given you 230 to 250 passing yards. It's just he would give you 50 against a very elite defense. Like in Madison that year, where the only reason we scored were a couple pick sixes from Josh Jackson that game. And there were several games kind of like that. I would say, you know, in my memory, the only substantial quarterback who maybe didn't regress under the Kirk Ken O'Keefe regime is Stanzi. I think Stanzi's senior year was pretty strong and probably every bit as good as when he took over for Christensen. Better, actually. Drew Tate, he's my favorite player of all time, but I'll even admit he regressed as a senior. So I'm just saying we're not getting quarterback progression year over year. That's been a long-standing problem on the offense. And now, if you ask me, now, who's my choice? Of course it's Grubb, but that's a pipe dream, and that's not going to happen, and that's not a Kirk kind of style. So if you're trying to think from a standpoint of knowing your limitations with who Kirk will want, I'm hoping for Paul Chryst, to be honest with you. I think that's about the best we can ask for, but I don't know. Paul Chryst, in my opinion, was a little bit of a better overall head coach than Kirk. I mean, he beat him more. Wisconsin was every bit a little, I would actually say a little higher than Iowa on the echelon in the Paul Chryst era. Obviously, the difference is Wisconsin saw it trending down and they got ahead of it, where Iowa just doesn't do that.
Real quick, I got to interrupt you, Brian. And if you have something else, you can add it here in a second. But I did see, let's see, who was it in the chat that brought this to my attention? So thank you to, let's see if I can get the right person. I want to give credit where credit is due. Daniel in the chat. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Yes, Brian Ferentz has released a statement, and I'm seeing it courtesy of Pete Thamel of ESPN. I don't know if this originated with Pete, but I'll share the statement for everybody so they can see this. This is, again, from Pete Thamel, ESPN reporter, and he tweeted this out here a little bit ago, and I will make this bigger for everybody. There we go. He says, statement from Iowa OC Brian Ferentz to ESPN. For the vast majority of my adult life, I've had the privilege to represent the University of Iowa as a football player and coach. I have always considered and will always consider it an honor. In that time, my singular goal has been to contribute to the football team's success. As long as I am employed by the University of Iowa, my stated goal will not change. My priority will continue to be the well-being of our students and the success of our team. That is Brian Ferentz, courtesy of Pete Thamel of ESPN. So not really much of any surprises, nothing. I mean, that's all pretty generic. I wouldn't be surprised if that was Brian's lawyer or Kirk's PR person that put that together. It's a pretty generic statement.
Very generic. You know, I can't help but think today is probably the roughest day of Kirk's 25-year tenure here. But what I kind of just keep coming back to, though, is I think Kirk, and I'm going to get blasted for saying this, but so be it. I think Kirk has been cashing in on his equity a little bit lately, where some of his decisions are a little more family over program. So, you know, I again, like, Brian's wasn't setting the world on fire of offensive coordinator to begin with. And so, Ken retires, and we're going to make a guy when we struggle at the quarterback position and developing him anyway. And historically always has. We're going to go with a guy who's a tight ends coach in the NFL and an O-line coach in college, and make him a quarterback coach. It just makes no sense. And I can't help but feel Kirk kind of set Brian up to fail there, unintentionally, I'm sure, but he did. I know you and I joked about how Kirk scanned the nation far and wide for a quarterback coach, and the answer was right under his nose. That when he's making decisions like that, it's just kind of indicative, in my opinion, of a guy who's resting on his laurels a little bit and not terribly concerned of pushing things forward. And again, I'm also just no, I was upset with the Minnesota game, don't get me wrong, but I think that could be a blessing in disguise in the long run, because it's about time we stop trying to beat bad teams barely. Like Northwestern at Northwestern when they had the protesters. You remember that year?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even though Alex Padilla played most of that game because Spencer got injured, we beat them, I think, 17-12. That was a horrendous Northwestern team, and yet we barely had enough to squeak by. I mean, we should be beating those guys 35-10. We should be. And yes, yardage does kind of matter. I know Kirk often chaffs at offensive yardage mattering when you're winning games, but when you're also 3-and-outing your defense to death, it's going to catch up to you. And it finally bit us in the butt. And I can't say that that's a bad thing, because we had no business losing to Minnesota. My last point, Corey, is, I almost think this just guarantees Deacon Hill for the rest of the year. Why? Because Joe Labus would make too much sense. He looked fine in the Kentucky game. Yes, Kentucky was down to bare bones. They had many players who opted out of that game, but he didn't make mistakes. He did run the ball pretty well when the offensive line broke down. He was mobile. He wasn't fantastic, but he also didn't turn the ball over, which is apparently job one as a quarterback at Iowa. I think it would just make too much sense, as opposed to having, a guy who looks like a left tackle playing quarterback and throwing 36%.
Can I just say real quick, if I was in charge, and maybe this team would probably be 0-8 if I was in charge, but I wouldn't go Joe Labus.
I would go Marco Lionez, to be honest with you.
As Joe Labus, give those guys each series and see what they can do.
And the thing is, I agree 1,000% with you. I would have said Marco, but I don't want to get laughed off the channel, because that there's just no chance in hell that's going to happen. It's Labus, if anybody, and there's just no chance for Marco under Kirk right now. Oh, he's a freshman. He's blah, blah, blah. Well, what do you have to lose? I think from all I've heard, Marco is a very talented guy, very athletic.
Yep.
What do you have to lose?
Well,
and I hope someday when Kirk leaves, we do get some backyard football. That's exactly what I'm churning for. I'm dying for it.
Backyard football, Ryan.
You bet.
Football.
Hey, what was wrong with watching Hendon Hooker with Tennessee last year? He was exciting, and he made plays.
I enjoy watching Brad Banks highlights today.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And all that.
I ran into Brad at the – where did I run into him? Was it at the Iowa-Utah State game? Might have been at the crossover game. And every time I see him – I've run into a few times just at games over the years, and every time I see him, I think, man, probably the best quarterback. You'd have to argue he's the best quarterback in the Kirk Ferentz era.
Well, I don't know. Kyle McCann started ahead of him, and Kyle McCann was our best chance to win the year before. I mean, that tells me Brad Banks just had to have the most monumental off season between his junior and senior year in college football history. And, I mean, gosh, Kyle McCann right now sounds fantastic compared to what we're looking at today. But again, that kind of speaks to the decision making Kirk has historically had at the quarterback position.
Yep. Well, Ryan, I appreciate you calling in, sir, and I hope you call in later.
When are you on?
I'll be on following the men's basketball exhibition game, and then we'll have Don Patterson on at 9:30.
9:30 sounds good.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that. And Jackson is with us. We've got Will, Trey, and I know Zach and Kyle are on with us as well. We just had a plethora of people. Let's see here. Yeah, Kyle is good for. Okay, he's good to wait for a little while. Thank you, Kyle, for bringing that to my attention. Let's bring Jackson, who's been on hold for quite some time, onto the show. Mr. College Football Alabama, Jackson Johnson is here with us. Jackson, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Corey. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. Roll Tide, right?
Yeah. Well, I do have a question though involving Kirk Ferentz.
Okay.
Is he gonna go the if he goes I go route in response to the Brian Ferentz?
Well, I asked that question to Tom Kakert earlier, and Tom is well connected to the program. Obviously knows Kirk a lot better than I do. Based on what Tom said, he does not believe Kirk will do that, and that isn't Kirk's history. Typically, Kirk has doubled down whenever there's pressure. This is a different type of pressure because it's involving the administration kind of going over Kirk's head, especially involving his son. So that's why I think it's a little bit of a different situation, different criteria at hand. But I would tend to default toward what Tom said and lean towards the idea that Kirk is not done and he will not leave, but he'll bring on somebody he's comfortable with, whether that be a guy like John Budmeyer, who was former OC at Colorado State and former quarterbacks coach at Wisconsin, or he brings in a guy like Paul Chryst, somebody that he's comfortable with, and it'll buy him more time. I mean, even if the offense looks relatively similar, with Brian gone now, that will quiet a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where Chris makes sense as a candidate. So, I mean, it's like you said, he's got a good relationship with one of the players, I want to say.
Well, he's got a relationship with John Budmeyer, because John Budmeyer was his quarterback's coach for a while, and I'm assuming, well, obviously Deacon Hill, the quarterback, he was at Wisconsin, transferred to Iowa last year, so I don't know what his relationship is like with his former head coach, but yeah, there's definitely connections there, and Kirk has been very complimentary of Paul Chryst. To me, a guy who was pretty successful as a head coach at Wisconsin, albeit a boring offense, might be a candidate that's worth looking at for the OC position, given that these are the confines we're going to be working within as it relates to scheme.
Well, I know that the Wyoming OC is one of the candidates, according to Tom. Tom's a pretty cool dude, by the way.
Tom does great. Yep. Loved having Tom on here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I just gave him a follow because I'm like, I'm interested to see what he's got to say.
He's been on the beat forever, Jackson, and anything Iowa related. He's got a great team working all the sports. So, yeah, HawkeyeReport.com, your on-3 source for everything Iowa related.
Oh, there we go. That is pretty cool. But I will say, if Iowa does, let's say they win out the rest of the regular season, is Kirk Ferentz still on that? What's happening with Kirk on all of this? Because we know Brian Ferentz is still gone.
Nothing's happening with Kirk. You're asking if they're going to force him out?
That's what I'm wondering. Win, lose, draw, regardless of the record, because of the.
He could go 6-6. He could go 6-6 the rest of the way, Jackson. He's not being forced out.
So,
yeah, he can go 6-6 and lose in a bowl game and end up 6-7, and he ain't going nowhere unless he decides to walk away. That'd be the one variable.
Yeah, but I will say, don't be losing at Wrigley Field this Saturday. That's for sure.
That would be a bad loss, 100%. But Northwestern's dangerous. They've proven to be able to beat people. So It's going to be an interesting Saturday, no question. Interesting week, interesting Saturday ahead.
Well, I will admit I was way down, like a lot of people. I was way down on Northwestern in the preseason. I mean, I said on one stream of the Voice College Football that Northwestern was going to have one win. I didn't even give them a second win. I didn't even think they were going to beat UTEP. But I give
that interim staff credit because they've rallied the troops better than Pat Fitzgerald was. They've won some games, and they're not going to be bowl eligible. But how many wins do they have right now? 3.
Well, right now they're at 4-4. They're 2 wins away.
Yeah, I mean maybe. Who are their last 4?
Well, they got Iowa at Wrigley Field on Peacock. They got to go to Wisconsin. And then there's Purdue the week before rivalry week. And then I believe they have to go to Illinois.
Yeah, those last 2 games are winnable. I'm not saying they'll win them, but those last 2 games, can you imagine they go 6-6 or bowl eligible after getting rid of Fitz? That would be a storyline.
Oh, man. I mean, David Braun would automatically get the head coaching job just for that. Although I'm just kind of like, I wonder if he's getting canned because of like his connection to Fitzgerald, but that's another time for another day. Sure. I'm on here talking about Iowa stuff.
Yep. I appreciate you calling in, Jackson, and I'm assuming you're going to jump over to the Big Ten show when you get off here.
I probably will. I'll probably go talk with Mark and then go talk with John for a little bit on the Ocho.
Well, I may see you there. I might try to call in during the Iowa men's basketball halftime show, and I'll jump on the Big Ten stream maybe for a while.
All righty, Corey. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, sir. Roll Tide. Appreciate Jackson being here. Let's go to, let's see, we've got Ryan. We went to Ryan already. Let's go to Will. Will's been on hold. Will's a Notre Dame fan. I recognize you, Will, from the Mark Rogers show. Are you gonna pull punches, or are you calling because you want Brian Ferentz as the next Notre Dame OC? Is that what's going on here?
We've had problems with our DCs too and OCs too in South Bend, but I'm happy for Iowa. I'm just kind of curious. Like, do you think that there's any chance that Beth has some sort of say in the new offensive coordinator because they gave her enough power to get rid of Ryan? Do you think they'll give her some power for the OC?
Yeah, not as Tom Kakert said earlier, unless Kirk comes back and says we're hiring Steve Ferentz or James Ferentz. No, I think he's going to hire who he wants to hire. And Beth's not qualified. I mean, she's not. I don't know that she's qualified to hire an offensive coordinator. That's why you have a head coach, right? That can fill out his staff as he sees fit. Now, there's been an issue with, promoting within, and especially involving Kirk's son for the last 6-7 years. But now that we've moved on from that saga, or we'll been moved on in that saga here in a few months, no, I think Kirk will make the hire, and he probably should. But at the same time, fans aren't going to like it if he hires, a guy that fits the same system that people are frustrated with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was going to throw out Chip Long. Have you thought about him at all as offensive coordinator, possibly? Chip Long.
I don't even know who that is. Who's Chip Long?
He was in South Bend from 2017 to 2019. I mean, we kind of ran a similar Big Ten style offense with him, focused on the tight ends and the running backs. And I thought he did a pretty good job.
Didn't he just let's see, I'm seeing a report. So he got hired as
he's an analyst for Louisville, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that perks my interest because he's been working with a guy I have a lot of respect for in Jeff Brom.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good question. Yeah. So he's quarterbacks coach at Tulane, analyst at Louisville. He was the OC at Georgia Tech for a year. So what didn't work out at Georgia Tech? Let's see.
I mean, it was their coach got fired.
Okay.
I believe. Yeah. But I mean, Georgia Tech was a mess under Jeff Collins. So I didn't think
So what was the Notre Dame offense like during that time period?
It was similar to, I mean, it's pretty similar to what it was under Tommy Rees, because Tommy was his quarterbacks coach under him. I believe, most Notre Dame fans just feel like he had a falling out with Kelly, and Kelly let him go. But most people thought he did a pretty good job in South Bend as a coordinator. He just didn't get along with Brian Kelly.
What I'm seeing here is that Chip Long, former Notre Dame offensive coordinator Chip Long, is also a former wide receiver and tight end at North Alabama. So
I know it's not really it's a lot different background, but I just feel like
connection to he was a Big Ten coach from 2010 to 2011, coached tight ends and fullbacks at Illinois.
yeah.
Has been kind of all over the country. I don't know much about him other than what you just told me. So yeah, that's a name to look.
Yeah, I just feel like he would be a good fit, sort of with what Iowa runs, but can do it better than what Brian did.
Yeah, I think you have the right mindset. Like I said earlier, that's kind of my mindset with Paul Chris. That's the right way you got to approach this. As a reasonable fan, we can all dream about Iowa going out and getting Ryan Grubb, or if you really want to be dumb, you can start talking about the Shanahan boys. But reasonably, they're going to hire somebody that fits within the confines of the system. That's probably the 8th time I've said that in the show. So maybe this guy, he's a former tight end, and Iowa's tight end. Maybe there's a fit there. And like I said, maybe he's learned something in his short time at Louisville under a quarterback guru in Jeff Fromm.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm hopeful for you guys because like I've been in other sports, I've watched like painful offenses with a good defense, and you just like want that like at least like top 80 at least sort of offense to help complement it. But like it's easy to like joke around with it, but like generally like I hope that because Iowa fans seem to be pretty respectful around the college football world and like other fan bases that I won't mention. But
I think you're right. The fans deserve better than they've gotten from the offense over the last 3 years. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So yeah, just hopeful. I don't know. I'm hopeful that Iowa can. I don't know. I feel like there's possibility for a playoff for Iowa if they nail this hire and get it right. Because like the special teams are great, defense is great.
Playoff. You're right about one thing. The playoff conversation should be the goal moving forward. Not that you don't want to win a Big Ten title, but it's going to be so hard to win a Big Ten title. Not as hard to make a playoff with the expanded 12-team field. So they may still make the Big Ten championship this year with Brian as the OC. Is what's wild about this whole situation. But they're not going to win. They're not going to beat Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan in the championship game. So you could argue they've wasted some elite defenses and special teams units, but you can't go back in time and change that. I think what you just said is right. This is the right decision to make now. Hopefully Kirk makes the right decision as it relates to play caller moving forward, and it should put them in a position to at least stay competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Knock on wood, stay competitive in a revamped Big Ten.
Yeah. You can see with Iowa, like I remember that 2015 team had a nasty defense. That 2009 team, I remember those crazy games, like competing against like the Ohio toe-to-toe with Ohio State. So I just know it's possible for Iowa to get to that point. So yeah. I'm just hopeful for you guys and that you can stay competitive in the Big Ten. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Corey. I just wanted to chat up the new OC because I'm curious, definitely gonna be curious to see what happens in Iowa City. But hopefully it'll be a fun Halloween that everyone can celebrate over there in Iowa City.
Well, I appreciate the Chip Long recommendation, and I'll do my due diligence on that before I publish my candidates for the OC job.
All right, take care, Corey.
Thank you, sir. All right, a couple of things here in the chat. First of all, I did not forget this, so I just wanted to hold off and make sure I gave Maureen our due. Maureen Rosen in the chat. Buy yourself a pizza, Corey. My hubs is working the basketball tonight. Well, thank you, Maureen. Appreciate that generous super chat. How about Maureen gifting the pizza that I had kind of joked about earlier? But I do appreciate that, Maureen. That will go toward dinner. So thank you for that. And definitely anybody who's willing to donate, whether it be by super chat or by PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, it's all much appreciated. We've been on here for about 2.5 hours. And so our sponsors for our regular programming, you can find all of those sponsors in our descriptions. But the donations certainly help, especially with live streams like this. This is not a sponsored live stream. Although, really, our sponsors are a big help for all of our programming. But I do appreciate the donation. So thank you for that, Maureen. Appreciate that and your generosity. Let's go back to our call line. We've got Zach on hold. Zach, welcome.
How's it going, Corey?
Going good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. I like what you said earlier. You don't like to see someone get fired or lose their job, but it's kind of a year overdue.
It's more than a year overdue.
Yeah. My question would be, if Iowa makes, let's say, a late December or even a January 1 bowl game, what would be the odds that they could install a new OC by then? if they let Brian coach through the end of the Big Ten season and then hired an OC after that for, let's say, a New Year's Day bowl?
Well, first of all, they've made this clear, and Beth Getz has made clear that Brian is going to coach through the bowl game.
Okay.
That's I mean, I can read you the exact language of that again, but let me actually do that. Let me find the exact quote from Beth. But she said in her release, "I informed Brian that our intention is for him to be with us through the bowl game, but this will be his last season with the program."
Okay.
So now, we can play hypothetical. Would it be smarter for Iowa to start interviewing now? Well, yeah. I mean, logistically, and there is somewhat of a. I mean, is there a chance that Iowa has a new coach in place before signing day? That's a question we could entertain. They could have a new guy lined up. Brian still is there, but at least having a new guy lined up could work. Well, I don't know the rules on that, but at least you could have a guy in place before signing day, if that makes sense.
Right. Could they have someone with a deal agreed to but not official, so they could tell recruits, or would that be against recruiting policy?
Well, they can announce whatever they want to announce.
Okay.
If they say, "Hey, Paul Chryst is our head coach or our offensive coordinator in 2024," they can announce that. I just don't know if Paul Chryst can actively recruit. My guess is he cannot. But if they at least can, you're right. They can tell recruits, "Hey, Coach Chryst is our quarterback's coach and our offensive coordinator moving forward." Perhaps that would, guys like James Resar, who's committed for the 2024, 2023, 2024 class. He's expected to sign in the early period starting in December. And of course, he'll be here next year in 2024. Guys like that. But I don't know if they may not lose anybody as a result of this. I don't know that there's anybody that has come to Iowa recently that's there because of Brian Ferentz. Maybe that's being insulting to Brian. I'm just not aware of any.
Probably not. And do you think they would? And I get your point about Kirk would probably want someone who's a Kirk type of offense. They probably wouldn't entertain someone. I don't think he would leave like a Nathan Shieldhouse at Iowa State.
That's a great one. I mean, first of all, no, I don't think Nate Shieldhouse is leaving Iowa State for Iowa, but he does have the connection because his dad played at Iowa. That's a good one.
Well, I think he was actually recruited by Iowa too.
He was recruited by Iowa. He's a Big Ten guy. Yeah. But can you imagine him jumping ship from Iowa State to Iowa? I cannot.
Well, I mean, that's what people thought, that they wanted the Iowa State coach to replace Ferentz as well, but I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. But that's a fun name. I need to start writing down these names because I love doing this. Because I remember when Ken O'Keefe stepped away, whenever that was, we had a similar conversation then. And people, I love these ideas from people. Now, some ideas, like again, you go back to the Stoops brothers, or these ideas are not even reasonable or practical. But Grubb is a person that they're never going to get, I don't think. But I know that people are going to throw that name out there. Most definitely Budmeyer. What do we say? Chip Long. Will mentioned Chip Long. That's an interesting name. I need to do more research on him. Who did you just say, Zach?
Nate Shieldhouse.
Yeah, Shieldhouse. Yeah. Now, this is his first year. If anybody doesn't know, his first year as the OC at Iowa State. But that is a name to watch. Paul Chryst is certainly a name to watch. The one name I haven't brought up? Who's one person that is well connected to Iowa that Kirk would be very comfortable with?
Oh, you're stumping me now.
I'll give you a hint. He's retired.
Part of me will say Don Patterson, but I don't think that'll happen.
No, I don't think it'll happen either. But I'm just saying, like, if Kirk's got 2 or 3 years left in the tank, and if he knows, hey, I'm probably not going to be here past 2026.
Yeah.
I think Don's got 3 years in him. Now, would he be my number one candidate? No, I don't think Don wants him to be. Don is not vying for the job. I can tell you that. But I'm just saying, like, if we're going to talk about Bill Lynch, who's 68, then why not talk about Don Patterson, who's 71? I know people are, be nice. People in the chat, be nice. If you rip Don Patterson, I'm very defensive about our coach on here.
I was going to say, please don't tell me you're going to say Urban Meyer.
No, I'm not going to say Urban Meyer.
Okay, good.
No. But I knew that as soon as I said something about Don Patterson, people would start ripping him. So anyways, I'll tell you what, what would be smart for Iowa to do at this point? This is my feeling. If assuming that, the decision's already been made that Brian's going to stay put through the end of the year. They would be wise to bring in Don to see if they could help them with just a more extensive advisory role for the final 4 games of the season. I don't know what the harm in that would be, but they could have done that a year or 2 ago.
Oh yeah.
And they haven't done it. So he's 71 and he's happily retired, but he is right there in Iowa City. That's why I bring him up. And he understands offense, he understands quarterback play. And he loves Iowa.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there would be any other former quarterbacks with Iowa ties besides. I don't think Drew Tate would leave. I don't think he would be quote unquote qualified yet either. I thought there might have been a former quarterback or 2 who might be coaching, but I might be wrong.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. Obviously Chuck Long is still coaching in the XFL. But
wasn't there one of them at Nebraska? Was it Chenander? But he was more defensive, wasn't he?
This is a better conversation with Coach Patterson. I don't know. Who's the guy that of course, he's not a candidate for the Iowa offensive coordinator position, but wasn't there a former quarterback that was recently on the Iowa staff? Who am I thinking of? Jason Manson.
Yes.
He's been the director of player development, I think, for a while, but he doesn't. Now, maybe he ends up, I don't even know where he's at right now. I'm looking at let me pull up his bio.
He was the quarterback of the famous Syracuse game, the goal line stand.
He was. Yeah, I don't know what he's doing now. I'm assuming he's still director of player development, but I wonder if they eventually move him into a coaching role. But no, he obviously wouldn't be a candidate for the OC job right now. But that's the only, when you said former Iowa coach, that's really the only one I could think of. Stanzi's not coaching. James Vandenberg's not coaching anywhere. And it doesn't have to be a former Iowa quarterback, but I understand what you asked.
Yeah, it's like what for a long time, switching sports. I know when Licklider was fired, everybody wanted someone with Iowa ties. And FERENTZ worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do kind of agree with Tom Caker a little bit. It's kind of like be careful what you wish for. Everybody was glad to see Alfred go in basketball. Then we got Licklider.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think probably for the next year or 2, it might still be the same offense. Now, if you can get someone like you said, like a Paul Christ, who ran a pretty good offense at Wisconsin and knows a passing game, that might be a little bit helpful. I wonder how much they'll have, maybe even Cade have a say in it too, who he might be comfortable with. I think on some message boards earlier, I saw some people mentioning Mike Hart from Michigan as well, if Michigan kind of starts going under, but I don't think he'd leave Michigan.
Why would he?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Bryce, thank you for the super chat. Bob Stoops doesn't know anything about offense. He's quoting me. Well, neither did Brian, LOL, and he somehow lasted 7 years. Fair point, but I know there's some cynicism there. React Flex, Matt Fitzgerald is a defensive guy as well. Let me see here. Just trying to find, there was another name that was in the back of my mind, and now I lost it. I can't find it now. But yeah, we're going to have this conversation for a while, because they should not be rushing into any decision. And my guess is if they hire Bud Meyer, we're not going to get an official word on that until after the season anyways.
Right.
I doubt we get word, even if Kirk hires anyone else, they probably won't even make that decision until after the bowl game. The only reason why I would encourage that is because of signing day in mid-December. But if they feel like they're fine without making that change, and they may be, this may not affect signing day at all, then perhaps then you just wait and make a decision in January, February.
True. Yeah. Don't make that hasty decision to where, where someone else becomes available that you actually wanted 3 months down the road.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go, Corey. Go Hawks tonight. I'll be watching the exhibition game, and thank goodness for basketball season.
Absolutely. It's here. Thank you, Zach. All right. I appreciate everybody being here. I've been on for 2.5 hours. I was not planning on doing this, but I had an appointment at 5:30 that got canceled, moved to tomorrow. And let's see. We've got James. Bill O'Brien. Bring on Bill O'Brien. I don't know what his background is, honestly, besides what he was the OC at New England. Obviously was at Penn State as a head coach. I don't know. What is he even doing now? Is he still on staff somewhere? I have no idea. Anyways, let's go to Kyle, who is with us. Kyle.
Good evening, Corey. What a roller coaster.
It's been a weird afternoon, I can tell you that. I haven't had anything to eat since like 10 a.m. But I'm right now. I'm working on that pizza that Maureen threw a super chat in for, so I'm working on getting that ordered.
Well, I don't know if you're like me, but on days like today, when you get news like that, food becomes a little bit of a sideshow rather than something you're really concerned about.
That's true. Yeah. So how's your? I know you were traveling earlier. Did you make it to your destination safely?
I did. We got stuck in a lot of traffic. I had to go to sort of southeast Chicago to drop off the girlfriend and then go about another hour south. So I kind of got out and unloaded her and then got back in. So a good 6 hours-ish altogether.
And real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Brian Bourne with the Venmo donation. And he adds, how fun would it be to have a varsity blues situation and Cade does the play calling the rest of the season? It would never happen, but it would at least be something entertaining. Anything for a change. Love your content from Ohio. Thank you, Brian. That is an interesting comment. I don't know that Cade is qualified to do that either. I know he's got a lot of experience as a quarterback, but I would probably rather put my trust in a guy like John Budmeyer to call plays than Cade McNamara. But at the same time, it sounds like we're not going to get either because Brian is sticking it out. Why would they remove play calling duties from him now?
They wouldn't. That just would make no sense. If they're going to do that, then why are we not just cutting ties altogether?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
taking away his primary responsibility.
I've made the comment before, Kyle. If Iowa was going to be able to attract a big name here, first of all, they're not going to be able to do it. Even if Kirk said, "Hey, I want to go get a big name, but I'm going to tell that said big name that we're going to work in the confines of what I want." Those big names aren't going to want to come here because you could argue that coming here to be the OC as a young up-and-comer or even an established guy, it'd be like suicide because you're automatically you're going to make yourself look worse. Like, I don't think Brian is as bad of a coach as he was made to look here. I don't think he was qualified to do what he was doing. I've made that comment clear in the past, but my guess is he's a decent tight ends coach or could be a decent offensive line coach, and maybe he'll go on somewhere else and do that. But the premise of what Kirk wants is so specific and I think antiquated that it just limits who they're going to be able to get on both ends of the spectrum.
I think everybody, in terms of trying to figure out who the next guy is going to be and doing all this wild speculation, you can't ask Steph Curry to come into the game and play like John Stockton. We're not going to get
exactly
the Steph Curry type of offensive coordinator come in and play pure point guard. He's not going to. Those guys have too much pride to do that.
And Connor making it clear, Bill O'Brien is the current Patriot OC. So I didn't know if he was still there. So thank you for that, Connor. And then Brian with the super chat, I'll buy the Swarm beer to go with the pizza. Hey, how about that? Brian dropping Swarm beer. So I've got to add that to my shopping list. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And then also James with the super chat earlier. He says, another thing I'd like to point out in a decent part of Kirk's successful seasons, we've been able to run the ball. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to recently. If you look at the stats, and Kyle, you and I have talked about that, they rarely have ran the ball well under Kirk. Now, they've had years, but they've won so much without an efficient run game. They ran the ball really well in 2020. I mean, that's the most recent example, and they went 6-2 and probably would have went 7-2, 8-2 if they had been able to play their last game in the bowl game. But what's the solution there? Is it scheme? Is it they still haven't found their guy as far as offensive line coach? They weren't great under Tim Polasek, and
No.
Tom Kakert brought up Tim as a potential name. I don't know about that. I may disagree a little bit with Tom on that. Now he's been out at Wyoming, and I don't know. They had some issues out there. See, who's the head coach at Wyoming? Bowl, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me find. So Polasek is still out there. People forget he left Iowa for the Wyoming offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach back in 2020.
Yeah.
And of course, he was an offensive coordinator, running backs coach at North Dakota State for 3 years prior. So maybe he would be a guy. I don't know. I wasn't blown away by his offensive lines at Iowa from 17 to 20. They were really bad in the middle. Remember the interior of that line in 2019. I bring that up all the time. You remember how bad guard play was that year?
Yeah.
Like
and honestly, in general, I mean, because I've been listening to the show for pretty much the whole duration, just in the car. My general thought on it is, because Brian is not going to be released until the end of the year, I think there's a part of me that feels like it's almost pointless to talk candidates, because a lot of the candidates will become available at the end of the year. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I don't love any of the candidates that are sticking out right now in terms of the situations that they're in now. And I think the reason for that is a lot of them are candidates because they're unemployed, and they're unemployed because they had a bad situation. So I think waiting until the end of the year to speculate a whole lot might be more pointed than just throwing out 15. I mean, I know it's fun. I'll participate in it too, just because it is fun. But I think the best candidate for the job has not yet been revealed.
So do you think, if you had to guess, do you think it'll be Bud Meyer?
If I had to guess, I would say Bud Meyer. I think of the names you've said, I like Chris the most, purely because I think his success running the ball would help us a lot. So I think of the traditional options that fit into Kirk's mold, I think he's the best just because of his success running the football.
Maybe he could teach Caleb Johnson a thing or two about lowering his shoulder pads. Although
I think he could.
Although if Liddell Betts can't teach him that, then I'm guessing Paul Chris can teach him that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Caleb Johnson could have himself a heck of a second half of a career if Paul Chris was here.
I mean, I think a lot of this starts up front, and I'll be anxious to see. Is this the last domino, Kyle? I mean, Kirk has been very complimentary of George Barnett, but does he stick around for year 4? That becomes a question mark. Does Kelton Copeland stick around?
Yeah.
The wide receiver room has been a disaster.
I would be very surprised if this is the last domino that falls. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like throughout the duration of the last few years, Kirk Ferentz has had his son kind of in the back of his head as somebody that he wants to defend, right? So he's got this stance of whatever happens on the offense, I'm going to defend it because it's my son. And now that his son is not there, I think the only loyalty that he has is to his scheme. And I think his loyalty to his scheme is strong, but I don't think his loyalty to his scheme is so strong that he won't make changes. I think his loyalty to his son was so strong he wouldn't make changes.
No, but I hope you're right on that. The only rebuttal I'd have to this whole conversation is the fact that this was his son. And it was because it was his son. Ultimately, it was not Kirk's decision to let him go right now. And if you look at Kirk's history, he hasn't let anybody go really. So, just because the administration decided to part ways with Brian because of the rules on nepotism doesn't. What reason does that to bring it to make us believe that, hey, Kirk's going to get rid of Kelton or get rid of George Barnett? The administration's not getting rid of those guys.
Just off the top of your head, when was the last time that Iowa fired somebody based on performance? I'm not talking about the scandal. Obviously, that was completely different. But when was the last performance-based firing at Iowa?
I've been asked that before. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't remember.
They've had guys move. I'm sure they've had guys move along. But man, And that's really too bad because I understand the model of consistency and retention and all that Kirk believes in, but Iowa's had plenty of poor offensive coaches over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Ken O'Keefe was more than qualified to coach wide receivers at Iowa. But he did so in the NFL for a while. But at the same time, like Greg Davis, good coach at Texas. I don't know how important he was. They had a lot of talent on that Texas national championship run team. Let's go down the list. They've had some. Let's see, Lester Erb, did he coach offenses? I'd have to go back through the different names that Iowa's had, but I don't know that he's ever fired anybody for performance since '99. Not that I can recall.
Yeah.
What happened with Aaron Hernandez's brother? Did he walk away? He was just like a GA or something.
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't paid or anything like that. I think he was a student at the time.
Okay. But anyways.
But I think it's and the other thing too with this whole thing is, I think I brought this up before. I like to think about Alabama because I feel like if you go back to those 2010 through 2014 Alabama teams, those were basically Iowa football teams with 5-star recruits. That's essentially what those football teams were. And that dynasty until Nick Saban hired Lane Kiffin in 2014, that dynasty was stalling out, in my opinion, because of the offenses. And that hire, I think, was a game changer for them. Shortly after that, you had Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts come through, so I don't know how much they had to do with it. But Lane Kiffin was certainly a good offensive mind that jogged their system and kind of took them from the RPO kind of tight end style throwing to more of a spread option or more of a spread team. And I think that changed a lot of their fate for the rest of the decade. And I feel like this is a really big moment because I think the Iowa kind of head brass obviously knew it because they, as you pointed out, they were putting pressure on Beth to make a change. But they have to be really careful with how they handle things here because I feel like there is a scenario, there's a universe where this kind of goes wrong and Kirk's gone and Phil's gone and a bunch of dominoes fall and we're in a rebuild. And then there's also equally a scenario where they make a great hire or Kirk makes a great hire. They put pressure on him to make a great hire and they end up, as Big Ten champions at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. I think those are both scenarios that could happen, but I think that the next 6 months are going to be really, really important.
I don't know if somehow those dominoes fell, Kyle, and Kirk left and Phil left and LeVar left, would you regret this decision if you were Iowa? I wouldn't. I wouldn't regret the decision. I may think, well, what would have happened had we just waited to the end of the year and let Brian leave? But he may not have left. He may not have.
Yeah.
They may have had to do this at the end of the year. If he wasn't willing to resign now, he may have done the same thing at the end of the year. So I have a hard time thinking under any circumstances that I would regret the decision. And I full well have made the statement, if Kirk wants to hold the program hostage and, basically threaten that he's going to leave if Iowa doesn't, retain Brian, me as a fan, I'm comfortable with that being the end of Kirk's tenure if that's where he's at upstairs.
Yeah, and I have no problem with it being the end of Kirk's tenure. The only thing he said that gave me pause was Phil. If Phil leaves, then I'm like, oh, I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more out of him. But if you tell me if you tell me Kirk walks away and we keep Phil and LeVar, I'm totally good. I have no and I don't want Kirk Ferentz to leave because I think you're right in saying that nobody came to Iowa to play for Brian Ferentz. I think you'd be crazy to say nobody came to Iowa to play for Kirk Ferentz. I think you lose Brian Ferentz, you don't really lose too many recruits. I think you lose Kirk Ferentz, I think you do lose a lot of recruits. So I'm not rooting for him to get out as fast as possible type of thing. That's not where I'm at right now. But if, like you said, if he's going to hold the program hostage and it's just him and Brian that are gone and not Phil and LeVar, et cetera, then it's kind of time to make that change.
And if Phil is, I don't know this, but if Phil has the mindset that I'm leaving if Kirk leaves, and Kirk has the mindset of I'm leaving. If Brian leaves, then you can't do anything about it. I mean, you can try to convince Phil, hey, please change your mind. But again, that's holding the program hostage if that's the case. So, you know, I would hate to see the end of the Phil Parker era, but he's not getting any younger either. And they do have a really
Phil Parker is what, 60 years old, 61?
How old is Phil? Phil is.
I think he's 60.
So he's, you know, he maybe has 8 more years. Who knows? How old was Norm when he retired? So Phil is 60.
Yeah.
How old was Norm when he retired? Let me look him up here, because I feel like he was pushing 70, wasn't he?
He was 72 years old when he died in 2014.
Yeah, so he was pushing 70 when he retired in what, 11?
Yeah, he was 68, 69.
So maybe Phil's got 9, 10 more years. I mean,
that's why I say you just give it a little bit of pause about Phil. But I mean, and I don't really understand. I mean, I know he has loyalty to Kirk, but I think he is the one, like you said. I mean, when we talked after that Minnesota game, you said, I feel bad for Cooper DeJean. I feel bad for LeVar Woods and Phil Parker because they've been covering for this guy for so long. I don't know why, watching this situation, Phil Parker would look at it and go, they fired the guy I've been covering for 7 years. I'm out. You know, and I know it comes with Kirk as well, but I mean, he has to understand the severity of what's going on, like, and the desperation behind what's going on. I mean, they've been lower than 130th in total offense 2 years in a row. I mean, it's ridiculous. So,
and this comment from Britt: any chance Phil Parker stated that Brian Ferentz goes or I go? I seriously doubt that.
No, Phil Parker did not say that. There's no way.
Phil Parker's relationship with Kirk is, by all accounts, very strong, and that would not.
I think he has too much respect for Kirk Ferentz to try and leapfrog his authority like that. I don't think he would try to put himself in the decision-making process. I think his mindset is to do his job and to not get involved in that stuff.
Now, here's let me tell you the dangerous thing, Kyle. If Kirk somehow did choose to walk away at the end of the year, what other job is going to be open here at the end of the season? What other job is going to be open that could prove to bite Iowa in the rear?
What job is open at the end of the year that could bite Iowa if Kirk leaves?
If Kirk leaves, not that he'd go to the other job, but what job would be open that might, if Phil's interested in being a head coach, might be attractive to Phil Parker?
Michigan? I don't know.
Michigan State.
Michigan State. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Michigan State. Correct.
He played at
I was
Michigan
thinking about
State.
this. That's right. He did.
He played at Michigan State. And I don't know that they've ever formally pursued him again, but nobody expected that job to be open. And with everything that happened with Mel Tucker, they are going to be looking for a new head coach. If I'm Michigan, regardless if Kirk leaves after this season, I'm pursuing Phil Parker.
I would back up the Brinks truck for Phil Parker if I was them.
And he may not be interested in that, but that'd be my biggest fear. If Kirk walked away right now, or at the end of the year, it'd be really bad timing, because I think Michigan State, if Phil Parker was open to a head coaching position, could he potentially choose to be the head coach at Michigan State over Iowa? Maybe. I mean, Michigan State also proved that they're willing to dump a whole lot of money on whoever their head coach is.
A whole lot of money. And I mean, we view the formula to a successful program here being an offensive mind plus Phil Parker, essentially. And you need LeVar Woods and some other pieces too. But why? I mean, Michigan State would be drooling over that scenario, thinking we can hire Phil and tell him, hey, you know, we're gonna bring you in as head coach. We're gonna find you a great offensive mind to complement you, and you guys can do your own separate thing. And I don't know why they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I again, and maybe Phil just isn't interested in any head coaching job. I can't imagine he wants to retire at 60. That's why I think Iowa would have a pretty good shot at retaining him if they made the right head coaching hire. But Michigan State would be the only job that would make me a little uncomfortable if Iowa and Michigan State both had head coaching positions open.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I mean, is there any chance that Phil would do that even if Kirk stays, just if he said, hey, like I've got 5 to 6 years left as a coach, I want to go do my own thing. I mean, I understand that's not been his mindset at all.
Exactly.
But
Most people, whenever I bring this up, they always say he's always said he doesn't want to be a head coach. I just
people that say that don't understand how these things work.
well, they also don't understand that things change. People change.
Yes, exactly. Situations change, and he's. I mean, what do you want him to say? Yes, I want to be a head coach when you've got the dean of college football as your head coach, like
Exactly.
the longest tenured coach. I mean, you expect him to say, "Yeah, I'm looking for a head coaching job." Like, he's not going to say that, and I understand he's doubled down on Kirk, but I mean, everyone has a soft spot for their alma mater. Everybody does, and everybody has a soft spot for a lot of money and a lot of power with a head coaching position. I mean, that's what coaches coach for, to get those opportunities.
Exactly. And so that's a fair question. How high on the ladder would Phil Parker be, or will Phil Parker be at the end of this season? Can you imagine, Kyle, if Brian's gone in January and then 2 weeks later, Michigan State steals Phil Parker from Iowa? Could you imagine?
We'll be coming on a live stream to mourn together.
Wow. Wouldn't that be
I will come on this live stream wearing all black if that happens. All black for the rest of the off season.
Frankly, with that job open and potentially other jobs, I've mentioned the Northwestern job in the past, both LeVar Woods and Phil Parker could be candidates for jobs out there somewhere.
Well, that was my next question for you, is how would you feel about LeVar Woods being offered head coach if Phil Parker says, I want to stay as the DC?
Boy, I think Phil Parker is, based on what I know, Phil Parker is much more qualified than LeVar Woods. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't know what Phil's relationship with LeVar Woods is like. I'm assuming that they are good friends, and so they would love to work together. But I don't know. That would be a weird dynamic, having a guy as young as LeVar Woods leapfrogging Phil Parker. But if Phil doesn't want to be a head coach, you don't want to be a head coach. You can't.
Yeah. How is LeVar mid 40s? Is he like 44, 45?
Well, he's got a kid in high school, so let's see. LeVar Woods, he can be more than 45. Yeah, he's 45. Good guess. 45 years old.
45. And how old was Kirk Ferentz when he got hired? Kirk's what, 60? Is Kirk 69 now? 68?
Kirk Ferentz is, no, he's
60.
Let's see, how old is Kirk?
He's not 70 yet, is he?
68. He's 68, so 24 years ago, yeah, he'd have been about the same age as LeVar Woods is now.
Yeah,
but
interesting.
The only difference is LeVar Woods. Now, LeVar did coach for a little while with the Cardinals, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So after he got done playing in the league, he was with the Cardinals for a while. But I think Kirk probably had a better NFL resume. Kirk also was a head coach at Maine. Now, they weren't very good at Maine, but
yeah.
And he never called plays. He was a head coach at Maine, never had called plays. But LeVar Woods also hasn't called plays and has never been head coach anywhere else. So that's why that move makes me a little bit nervous. I've said that.
Yeah. If even just kind of outside of LeVar, if we are in a position in the next year or two where we're looking for a head coach, is there any kind of draw to or commitment to the style of Kirk Ferentz when we hire the next coach, or is it just like we're going to take the best guy available? Like, I mean, if somebody like, again, ridiculous comparison, but if somebody in the fold of Lincoln Riley becomes available, just a complete stylistic opposite from Iowa becomes available that is a good coach, like is there any commitment to continue based on what's on the roster currently, or do you just say we're going to take a turnover period here and we're going to change the style up completely?
Why would you limit yourself based on what you currently have, especially with the transfer portal? Look at I know Colorado's no power, but look at what they've done, completely overhauling their roster.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to come into Iowa and do that, but I would hope that Iowa would be completely open-minded, and I'm sure Lincoln Riley would be thrilled to move from USC to Iowa, right?
Well, I could tell you, Lincoln Riley is allergic to competition. So I don't know with the new Big Ten and USC coming in that he's going to necessarily be thrilled at either job.
I was going to say, it's not going to get any easier at Iowa if he had to take that job. But
no,
I would hope that once Kirk walks away, I would hope that Iowa's completely open, whether that's Beth or someone else who's making that hire. They're completely open to different types of candidates.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and again, I think we're so far removed from that conversation, even with OC, that like the speculating for head coaching jobs is probably not very well placed at this point either. But it's just such a, I don't know. I mean, do you see what I'm saying when I talk about the reflection point? Like, is there what percent chance would you give it that it all comes falling down in the next 6 months with Phil leaving and Kirk leaving and everything? What percent chance would you throw on that?
5% or
Okay.
less.
Okay. So you don't think that's outside of the realm of what is expected?
I don't know, based on what, Tom came on here and is fairly confident that Kirk's not going anywhere. I've made the comment that I wouldn't be surprised if Kirk goes somewhere. I guess what I'm saying is, based on that language and based on what I've heard from other people that have been given no indication that Kirk has given any indication that he might leave. Now, this changes the game a little bit potentially. I would say just that move, I would say, is less than 40%, maybe even less than 30%. And then when you add on top of that what you're saying, not only Kirk leaving, but also Phil leaving, also LeVar leaving, then that's why I end up down at like 5%. Because I think if Kirk leaves, there's a chance they could retain Phil. He's 60 years old.
Yeah.
So, no, I doubt this sets off that big of a domino effect.
Okay.
But if it does, it does. I know I don't want to sound nonchalant.
Yeah.
I just think if it does, it does. I'm sick and tired of watching this offense year after year. I just am.
No, I am too.
I'm sick and tired of it.
And I'm not even, I mean, I think I've watched the offense for so long that I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say numb to it, but I'm somewhat numb to it. I continue to just feel bad for Phil Parker, LeVar Woods, and all the individual defensive studs that we've had. I mean, I felt horrible for Jack Campbell last year. I mean, Jack Campbell deserved to be playing in a college football playoff the way he played last year. I mean, Jack Campbell is one of the most spectacular players. Like, if you watch like play by play every Iowa game, Jack Campbell is one of the best players to ever come out of Iowa, ever.
So
in my
Cooper
opinion.
DeJean.
So is Cooper DeJean, one of the best ever.
Yeah, I agree.
There's so many of those guys you could go down the list and just say, man, what if? Like, what if they had this? What if they had that? And that's just where I come from. I just feel bad for those guys.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Kyle, and I appreciate you calling in. Got Erica and Clayton behind you. I'm going to try to wrap this thing up before the Iowa basketball games. Are you watching the men's basketball game?
Is it how do we stream it? Is it on ESPN Plus or what is it on?
No, it's BTN Plus.
Oh, BTN. Yeah, I probably won't. I'll see the highlights on YouTube later.
They usually have I can't endorse that on there. Usually there's a stream that pops up somewhere on Twitter, I've noticed. So,
yeah, you might be right. I might have to look, but again, we can't endorse that.
Yep. Excellent.
What is the start time for the Dawn live stream?
Should be 9:30. So I'll plan on doing a post game show for basketball around 9, and then we'll do a short post game, and then we'll be with Don. Hopefully not too late, but yeah, this will be a long evening. But yeah, 9:30 p.m.
I'm fascinated to hear what he says, because he's, he comes at it from a different perspective than we do, and I don't know. I'm curious to hear where he's going to go with this one now that the news is out there. Like, would he have done it this way, and what he thinks is next, and all that stuff.
Yeah, well,
he's gonna be a good listen.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate it, Kyle.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Corey.
Thank you, sir. All right, a couple things in the chat before we get to Erica and Clayton. Charles says, my question as a fan, will Kirk be involved with the new hire for OC? Yes. And philosophy will stay the same. Do I agree that they should change philosophy or look at it? Sure. But Kirk's not going to do that this late in the game. And if he were to somehow do it, I'd applaud him, but it's not going to happen. Carrie, any word on the Noah Shannon situation? I didn't get this question, Carrie, until Tom got off. So my guess is maybe that will be the one other topic addressed tomorrow at the Kirk Ferentz press conference. But man, the NCAA is sure doing Noah Shannon a disservice. CJ, is there tampering in college football? Sure there is. Could they go after Mark Stoops if he just signed an extension? I don't know the bylaws of Mark Stoops' contract at Kentucky, but I don't know why they couldn't pursue him. Last I knew, there was a stipulation in his contract that he could potentially leave for Iowa. That's what I had been told at one point, but again, I don't have the contract in front of me, but that's what I've been told. Douglas says, why not LeVar Woods? My only hesitancy with LeVar Woods as the next head coach is the fact that he hasn't called plays and has not been a head coach anywhere. Kirk Ferentz didn't call plays before he got here, but he was a head coach at Maine. That doesn't mean LeVar would be a bad head coach. Maybe he'd be excellent, but I don't know that. And so I think it's a riskier hire than a guy like a Phil Parker or even one of the Stoops brothers who are proven. Granted, they are older, don't have maybe the longevity of a guy like LeVar, but that's my only reason for hesitancy there. Tyler says, if Iowa loses this week, do you think the cord gets cut? No, I don't. This is they could go 0-4 the rest of the way, 0-5 with a bowl game, and I think Brian's going to be here unless he just decides to resign, but it doesn't sound like he has any intention of doing that. LFG, does this mean we don't get to keep tracking the points per game average? That was the most fun part of the season. I'll have to talk with Don Patterson. I wonder if we should continue that or not. Maybe we'll lay that to bed, put that to rest in a special tribute to Brian Ferentz. But yeah, usually it's up here in the corner where this logo is right now. Nolan, what was the coach's name from NDSU that you wanted to take over as quarterbacks coach? What was that, a year and a half ago? Randy Hedberg, and he's still at North Dakota State as far as I'm aware, passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Write his name down as well. I don't know if he'd be qualified for this job or not, but boy, he was more than qualified for the quarterback coach job. Xander, also wouldn't hurt to talk wide receiver coach. It sure hasn't been glamorous either, maybe even more so than all the other offensive woes. Thoughts? I'd be looking at everything, Xander. Wide receiver play has not been good. O-line play has not been good. Play calling has not been good. Quarterback play has not been good. That's how you become the worst offense in the Power 5 and in the FBS. Brian, I'm going to be laughed at for this, but I'd put Cooper on offense. I ain't laughing. I've made that comment several times. Phil would have our DBs in much better shape than our quarterback room currently is. I wouldn't necessarily be putting him full-time on offense, Brian, but I would consider that. Even if you're dealing with some depth issues at corner, assuming that they're going to get Deshaun Lee back this week, maybe you play with that, but I doubt they do. I think they've got bigger fish to fry. At least Kirk will think they have bigger fish to fry right now than making a position change. But it would be innovative. It'd be an innovative way of thinking. That's for sure. Hawkeye Howard, what time does the basketball game start? Starts in 20 minutes, so I'm not going to be on here a whole lot longer. Brian, Coach Close will not be with me tonight, but he will be returning for another year of Iowa postgame. So be sure to stay subscribed here. And as we get into the heart of the season, Coach Close will be joining us. James, thank you for the super chat. Here's one I know will never happen. Tom Brady. Wouldn't that be something? Kirk Ferentz hires Tom Brady. That would be interesting. Doesn't mean Tom Brady would be a good coach, but would be interesting. Lloyd Christmas, who said that Brian actually resigned? Is that official? No, Brian did not resign. I want to make that very clear. Brian was asked to resign and reportedly said no, and Iowa announced that he would not be returning, courtesy of AD Beth Getz. Mark, how much of a Brian Ferentz's failure is due to poor play calling or poor coaching? It seems like wide receiver coaching has been horrible for years. Yeah, they've got more than one problem, and a lot of it comes back to Brian because he's been the OC. It also comes back to Coach Ferentz, and yeah, they need to be looking at everything. They'd be looking at wide receiver position. They'd be looking at the offensive line coach spot, personnel, all of this. But I think you're going to have limited change as long as Kirk Ferentz is there. But this is still a step in the right direction. So hard to put a percentage on it, Mark, but there are multiple issues. Hopefully this is not the only adjustment made, but it is an adjustment made by the administration. So who knows what Kirk will do moving forward. Let's see. Erica is with us. Erica, welcome to the show.
Hello, good evening. How's it going?
Going good. How are you, Erica?
I'm doing pretty good. So I just wanted to.
I bet you're real happy.
You must have seen my Twitter earlier. Yes, I am very happy, suffice it to say.
I didn't say your Twitter earlier, but I know how you felt about the Brian Ferentz situation for a long, long time now. So
yeah.
I don't blame you for being happy. It's okay to be happy. I mean, I think we all need to put our expectations in check, but it's okay to think, just like when Gary Bartle walked away or was pushed out, that it was a step in the right direction. This is step 2 in the right direction. Brian Ferentz not returning.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's always kind of a bummer when someone loses a job. However, he needed to be held to account. So Beth has done the right thing.
Correct. I agree.
And I also think it's about time. And I'm going to get hate for this in the chat because I'm sure there's some Kirk homers here tonight. But I think it is time that, the AD director shows our head coach who's boss a little bit. You know, it's not his program. You know, like he needs to put the team before his family and everything like that. So it's about time someone kind of stood up to him. I think I don't want to say his head is too big because I don't think that's necessarily true, but he did kind of act like it was his program, you know, with all the nepotism stuff, etc. And it's about time that someone shows him, hey, it's not your program. You know, no coach is bigger than this football team. It's all about the team, you know. But I did want to ask two different things. The first thing is, are we sure that Kirk is definitely coming back? And the reason I ask this is I remember hearing, I don't remember if it was from you or someone on Twitter or maybe one of the message boards that I read, but the thing I've always heard is as soon as Brian goes, so does Kirk. So has that changed?
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
Again, relying on Tom Kakert's expertise, he doesn't seem to think that Kirk is going anywhere. And based on conversations I've had with people who are well connected with Kirk and with the program, better connected than I am, that has been, at least over the last season, over the last calendar year or so, that has been the feeling that if Iowa somehow forces Brian out, that Kirk will leave. So that's why I brought it up earlier in the show. So I've gotten mixed response on that, but I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably still a better chance that he sticks around because he's basically made it clear that he plans on being back next year. Now that was prior to this news breaking, but I just wouldn't be shocked if, given everything that's happening, he left. But it would not be a great look. It would not be a great time to leave. I think, you know, to me, what would make sense for Kirk Ferentz to do is to stick around, fix the offense the right way, and go out on a high note. Even if you're not going out with 10 wins, if you can go out with 8 or 9 wins in a much more difficult Big Ten with a at least capable, palpable offense, that's how I would prefer Kirk Ferentz go out. But I don't know Kirk personally well enough to be able to say what I think he's going to do.
Yeah, because how can I say this? So first of all, I was shocked when Barta retired, which I think those words, I think that's BS. I don't think he retired. I think he was quietly pushed out, but we'll never know one way or the other. So it is what it is. So that's number one. Number two, who thought, that we'd be hearing this news today, right? Unless you were very much in the inside and knew that it was coming for a few days or something like that. Whoever thought we would see in the middle of the Hawkeye season that Brian would be Gonberger next season? I would have never, that was not on my bingo card. I'll put it that way. It was not on my bingo card. And that's why I'm like, it could very well be that Kirk does leave. And, you know, if he doesn't, I hope that, like you said, he does go out on a high note. I think he's already tarnished his reputation enough. Personally, that's my opinion. Obviously, a lot of people in the chat are going to disagree. And that's fine. But my opinion is he's tarnished his reputation enough. The reputation of the program is tarnished enough. And I'm not saying that's just because of Kirk or anything like that, but the facts are both things are tarnished. So I would not be shocked to see Kirk leaving. Now, that being said, I really hope that whatever they do is done the right way. Like you said, if he stays, that he gets the offense back going the way it should be. Or if he leaves, you know, maybe something's known that we don't know yet, and they do succession planning properly. That leads me to my next question. I know that we've talked about Bob Stoops. I've been on record saying I don't think he would take a job at Iowa. But I had a discussion with Mark Rogers on his show either last week or the week prior about you know, the coaching situation at Iowa, et cetera. And he suggested, and I agreed, I think this is a brilliant idea. I totally agree with it. He thinks it would be a good idea if Bob Stoops came back for a few years, sort of as a transitional coach. He could, you know, work beside like maybe LeVar Woods. He could be a head coach, you know, quote unquote, in training or something like that. Obviously, the media or, you know, the university would not term it that way. But, you know, I don't see why not. You know, Bob does bleed black and gold. That means that he wouldn't have to deal with NIL forever, which, as I've said before, I don't think he's a fan of doing it. I don't think he likes the new atmosphere that's happening in football. I've said that. He's made it very clear if you watch the videos on his channel. That being said, I think he'd be willing to sacrifice a couple of years if it means Iowa gets in a favorable position in this new Big Ten. And if the succession planning is successful and we end up running, you know, a top, let's say, 15-20 program as a result.
If Kirk ends up leaving after this season, Erica, I would be all for your idea. I'd be all for, and I've kind of talked about the same thing, using him and saying, hey, you got 3-4 years, fine. Now, the one challenge with college football is how do you recruit with a guy that doesn't have a whole lot left in him? But Kirk Ferentz doesn't have a whole lot left in him.
Right.
He's still
right.
recruiting. So, there might be some instability, uncertainty as it relates to the recruiting trail, but I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, in that way, I think we get a few more years out of Phil Parker, and if he sees that this transition/training is successful, maybe that'll convince him to stay if he was thinking of leaving.
Yeah, and that's frankly, I probably if Bob said, hey, I got 2 to 3 years as a transition period, but I really don't have more than that. If Phil's willing to take the job for 8 to 10 years, I'm giving it to Phil.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather be guaranteed to have 8 to 10 years with Phil than 3 to 4 years with Bob.
Oh, of course. I'm speaking assuming that Phil is not interested, because I don't think he is. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. And if he is, great. Let's absolutely offer it to him first, because he is deserving. And Bob is much better as a Sooner as a Hawkeye. Mark Stoops, nah. I don't see why everybody's so big on Mark Stoops. I'm going to be honest.
I'm not huge on Mark Stoops. He's won more games at Kentucky than most people would.
Right.
Conference, but that's also the weaker of the two divisions.
Right.
Yeah, I'm higher on Bob. I like Bob more than I like Mark, just from a coach's perspective. I don't know maybe as much about that's a good that's maybe a conversation we could have with Coach Patterson tonight, is kind of outline the differences between the three brothers. I've talked to Don a little bit about that, but they're all defensive minded guys. Obviously, Mike has not had as much of a successful career as Mark, and certainly Bob has had. But I don't know if it's fair to weigh Mark and his success at Kentucky versus Bob's success at Oklahoma, because Kentucky has been such a difficult job to win at, given the conference compared to Oklahoma. So they both would be good hires. I think both those guys could succeed at Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, number one, you ask Phil what he wants, right? That's number one. If Kirk does leave, you call Phil in, or Beth calls him in, tells him this is the situation. How much money do you want to be head coach? Number one. If he says yes, great. They start negotiating the salary, whatever. If he says no, you know what? I'm not really interested in head coach. The next question becomes, what will it take to keep you here?
Right.
For the next 8 to 10 years. Right? And then they negotiate that, whatever. And then they give Bob Stoops a call. And they say, look, Bob, this is the situation. We've convinced Phil to stay, and, we're going to pay him all this money. And the next thing we want to do is make you transition, train the head coach in waiting in LeVar Woods. Because I understand what you're saying about LeVar not having the OC experience, not making calls. But I think or not making play calls, I should be more specific. But I think the thing that's winning about LeVar is, first of all, he has the right attitude. We've talked a lot about on this show about how people have defeatist attitudes about Iowa. I'm not going to get in that rant again. I've done it over and over, but he does not belong to that mindset. He thinks we can do anything. He thinks Iowa can conquer the world. He bleeds black and gold too. So I think also, that being the case, he will make the right phone call when it would come time to hire offensive minds, whether that be someone from Hawkeye's past or somebody else from the outside. I personally think it might be better for someone from the outside, but he will know who to call to make the right call.
Well, let me say this. I think the idea that kind of what you're implying, if you can get a few years out of Phil and somehow retain LeVar and convince him to be your DC. Now, I don't know, would he be as good of a defensive coordinator as he is a special teams coordinator? I have no idea, but if he's going to be a head coach, I'd much rather him have some years as a coordinator, a non-special teams coordinator. Maybe that's the ideal. Maybe you get a few years out of Phil, and then LeVar is ready to take over the reins. Maybe he would be, maybe he wouldn't be. I don't know, but that's a fair estimation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's what the plan should be. I personally, I don't know. I think Kirk might end up leaving. I think there's more of a chance of that than people are giving credit to. And I think people need to start thinking about the future. And I don't mean just next year once Brian is gone. I mean further down the line, because if we want this program to survive and do better than what we're accustomed to, which I think is a reasonable goal, that we try to get, maybe some playoff games or some championships. I know it's not going to happen straight away. It takes time to rebuild and all that stuff, but I don't see why we shouldn't be able to work towards that. Right. We're part of the Big Ten. There's a lot of money in the Big Ten now with all these TV deals. So I don't see why we can't lure that talent, and then having the good coach would help us with recruiting too.
Yeah.
And everyone always says we can't recruit to Iowa, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're starting to get more 4-stars. If you take a look at who we've been getting in the last few years, we are starting to get more highly ranked recruits.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So,
Erica, I've got to let you go because I've got to wrap this thing up by 7, but feel free to call in later with Coach Patterson. I always enjoy hearing from you.
yeah, thank you very much for taking my call.
All right. Thanks, Erica. All right, folks, here's the deal. We're going to have one quick commercial break to thank our sponsor before one of our show sponsors before we head to our final caller of the day as we come up to the 7 o'clock hour and the start of Iowa men's basketball versus Quincy in their exhibition. We'll be right back. To Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. Appreciate Iowa Floor Covering and their awesome products. Give them a call for all of your flooring needs. They also do tile, shower tile, carpet, all kinds of stuff. Great stuff from Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. And we're about to head to Iowa and Quincy men's basketball. We'll be followed by a postgame show. But let's get to our final caller of the night. Clayton's with us. Clayton, welcome to the show.
Hey, Corey, I understand we're on short time here, so I'll be real brief. Just a couple quick comments. First of all, when I heard the news today, the only thing I could think of was, when is Corey going to be on live? Not if, but when. So thank you, sir, for being reliable.
Well, thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you for the show. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing is, I just want to give a shout out to a previous caller. I think his name's Brian. He calls in all the time. Real knowledgeable guy, and he always gives me the opportunity to reflect on myself as a fan. And I called in a couple weeks ago and told you that I was okay with the lack of offensive production as long as we were winning. And that didn't happen in our last game.
It's true.
So he made the comment that, we were the nation's laughingstock because, Iowa was willing to deal with the ineptitude on offense. And it kind of put me on notice. So I've kind of changed my tune about that. So I just appreciate his input on that because I think that was really important for me to think about. It's not just about the W's; it's about if the W's are sustainable. And we found out that that's not the case.
And
so,
if they're not sustainable against this schedule, imagine how non-sustainable they'll be against future schedules with the
absolutely. Yeah, and obviously nothing's going to change staff wise because the OC is still finishing out the year, but if he's got nothing to lose, maybe we'll start seeing some shenanigans. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that would be great. I'd be all for that.
And just one last thing, Corey, so we can wrap this up. I really wish you were a wrestling fan because there's a lot of psychopaths out there that would love this sort of forum to talk to you about wrestling.
Well, we may have something for you down the road. I am not a wrestling guy myself, but I've heard people like you make that comment. So never say never. I'll say that, Clayton.
Sounds good, Corey. Hey, I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to tonight's show with Coach Don.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate Clayton hanging around. And thank you, everybody, for waiting as long as they have on hold. Thank you. And remember, we'll be live following the Iowa-Quincy exhibition game, which starts in 2 minutes over on BTN Plus. So be sure to tune in to BTN Plus. It's like $10 a month, folks. You get $10 a month for 2 months. You'll get all the men's and women's games. I think it's worth it personally. And then, of course, following the game, I'll be live talking about it. And then at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, myself and Coach Patterson for a previously scheduled edition of Hawkeye Hangout. So a long evening still in front of us. But thank you to everybody for being here the last 3.5 hours. Some of the biggest news we've had in a long, long time. Iowa offensive coordinator will not return following the 2023 season. He will officially be out as the offensive coordinator. Long time coming. And we'll see how Kirk Ferentz in this program moves forward and where they move for the next OC, and if Kirk will be a part of that as the head coach. I know there's speculation both ways. Thank you to everybody for being here, folks. We will see you in a couple of hours right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you soon.